At my grandson's christening, my son's wife looked me dead in the eye and said, "You are nothing but a checkbook with a heartbeat. Get out." I did not scream. I did not flip the table. I simply smiled, walked over to the crib and whispered, "Okay, but I am taking something with me." When she realized what I had taken, she screamed so loud the crystal glasses shattered. Before I tell you how I brought their fake empire crumbling down in less than 24 hours, let me know which city you are tuning in from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been treated like an ATM by the people who are supposed to love you. My name is Orson Diggs. I am 68 years old. I have spent 45 of those years crawling through crawl spaces, wiring skyscrapers, and building Diggs Electric from a single rusted van into the biggest contracting firm in the state. My hands are permanent maps of scars and calluses. They are black, rough, and strong. They are the hands that paid for the roof over my son's head. But last Sunday, standing in the foyer of a mansion I bought, those hands were apparently not good enough to touch my own grandson. The theme of the party was purity and pastels. That is what the invitation said. Courtney, my daughter-in-law, had insisted I wear a beige linen suit. She sent it to my house with a note that said, "Please wear this, Dad. Your usual black suits are too funeral for a baby's big day." I felt ridiculous. I looked like a giant oatmeal cookie wrapped in expensive fabric. But I put it on. I put it on because Etta, my late wife, would have wanted me to keep the peace. Etta always said Orson be the water, not the rock. For her sake, I walked into that party trying to be water. The house was filled with people I did not know. They were Courtney's friends mostly. Young, wealthy, white, and loud in that way people are when they have never had to worry about a bill in their lives. They sipped champagne and ate tiny sandwiches that looked like pencil erasers. I stood in the corner holding a glass of sparkling water, feeling the weight of their eyes. I knew what they saw. They saw a big, aging black man who looked uncomfortable in a designer suit. They did not see the CEO. They did not see the father. They saw a prop. My son Kendrick was across the room. He was laughing at something a tall man in a polo shirt said. Kendrick looked good. I paid for his teeth. I paid for his college. I paid for the hair plugs he got last year because he was terrified of going bald like me. He saw me standing there alone, and for a second his eyes met mine. I waited for him to come over. I waited for him to say, "Hey, Dad, come meet my friends." Instead, he looked at his watch, tapped the other man on the shoulder, and turned his back to me. That stung more than the cold air conditioning. I decided to focus on the reason I was there. Leo, my grandson. He was 6 months old, lying in a satin-lined bassinet in the center of the living room like a little prince. He was the only real thing in this room of plastic smiles. I walked over, my heart softening. He was awake, kicking his little legs. He had Etta's eyes. I reached out a finger to stroke his soft cheek. Suddenly a hand clamped onto my wrist. It was Courtney. She did not smile. She did not whisper. She pulled a container of wet wipes from her purse and started scrubbing my hand. "Oh, Orson," she said, her voice loud enough for the nearby circle of women to hear. "You know how sensitive Leo's skin is. You have been working, haven't you? Your hands are just gritty. We can't have that bacteria on the baby." I froze. I hadn't worked a job site in 5 years. I had scrubbed my hands for 10 minutes before I left my house. These were not dirty hands. These were just black working hands. The women around us giggled softly. "Courtney," I said, keeping my voice low, "my hands are clean." She smiled, that tight, fake smile that never reached her eyes. "Let's just be safe. Why don't you go get a drink in the kitchen? The catering staff is in there. You might have more in common with them." The insult was precise. It was surgical. She was telling me I belonged with the help, not the guests. I pulled my hand back. I looked at Kendrick. He had seen the whole thing. He was standing 10 feet away. He did not step in. He took a sip of his drink and looked at the ceiling. I walked to the kitchen, not because she told me to, but because if I stayed in that room, I was going to lose my temper. The kitchen was chaos. Caterers were running back and forth. I stood by the granite island granite I had paid for and tried to calm my breathing. Courtney followed me in a minute later. She didn't come to apologize. She came with an agenda. "Dad," she started, her tone shifting from condescending to sickly sweet. "I am glad I caught you alone. Listen, the landscaper is coming tomorrow. We decided to redo the backyard. The pool needs a waterfall, and I want to import those Italian olive trees for shade. It is going to be another $50,000. I looked at her. $50,000. I had just given them $10,000 in a card for the baptism. I paid the mortgage on this house. I paid the lease on her Mercedes. Courtney, I said, my voice heavy, I just gave you a check, and I pay $10,000 a month for your expenses. The backyard is fine. Her face changed. The sweetness evaporated like water on a hot skillet. Fine, she snapped. It is pedestrian Orson. It is embarrassing. My friends are out there judging us. We need to maintain an image. Just write the check. You have the money. What are you going to do with it? Take it to the grave. I set my glass down. I am not an ATM, Courtney. I am your father-in-law. And right now I am a guest who is just humiliated in front of your friends. No. No money for olive trees. She took a step closer. She was small, but her entitlement made her loom large. She pointed a manicured finger in my face. Listen to me, old man. We tolerate you. Do you understand? We invite you to these things because we have to, because you pay the bills. But don't think for a second that you fit in here. You are embarrassing. You are loud. You are unrefined, and you remind Kendrick of everything he tries to forget. I looked past her at the kitchen doorway. Kendrick was standing there. He had followed her. Kendrick, I said, you hearing this? Kendrick looked at his shoes, his expensive Italian loafers. Dad, just give her the money. She is under a lot of stress. Don't make a scene. You agree with her? I asked, feeling a cold numbness spread through my chest. You think I'm embarrassing? Kendrick finally looked up. There was no love in his eyes, only annoyance. Dad, look at you. You are wearing a beige suit and you still look like you just crawled out from under a crawl space. You don't fit in our world. Just pay for the trees so we can go back to the party. Courtney laughed, a cruel, sharp sound. See, even your son knows it. You are nothing but a checkbook with a heartbeat, Orson. That is your utility. So either write the check or get out. We have an image to uphold. The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator seemed deafening. A checkbook with a heartbeat. Something inside me snapped, but it wasn't a violent snap. It was the sound of a heavy steel door slamming shut and locking. It was the sound of the finality. I looked at Kendrick, the boy I had taught to ride a bike, the boy I had held when he cried over his first breakup, the boy I had built an empire for. He wasn't there anymore. There was only a stranger in a suit I paid for. Okay, I said softly. Okay. Courtney blinked, surprised by my surrender. So you will transfer the money? I didn't answer. I brushed past her. I walked out of the kitchen and back into the living room. The party was in full swing. Someone was making a toast. I walked straight to the bassinet. The guests parted ways, sensing the energy radiating off me. I wasn't the oatmeal cookie anymore. I was the rock. I looked down at Leo. He was sleeping now. Pinned to his little white onesie was a gold brooch. It was a small, rough nugget of gold with a single, old-cut diamond in the center. It had belonged to my great-grandfather, a man who was born a slave and died a free landowner. It was the only thing of value he had left to me. I had pinned it on Leo earlier that morning, a symbol of our legacy. Courtney and Kendrick came rushing out of the kitchen. "What are you doing?" Courtney hissed, trying to keep her voice down but failing. I reached into the bassinet. I unpinned the brooch. My hands were steady. "That is Leo's," Courtney shrieked. "No," I said, my voice booming across the silent room. "This belonged to a man who knew the value of blood and soil. It doesn't belong to a prop." I pocketed the brooch. Then I reached onto the side table where the stack of gifts was piled high. I found the thick ivory envelope with my handwriting on it. Inside was a cashier's check for $10,000. I picked it up. "Put that back." Kendrick stepped forward, his face flushing red. "Dad, everyone is watching. You are crazy." I slipped the envelope into my inside pocket. "I am just a checkbook, remember?" I said to the room. I looked at the crowd of strangers. My son says I don't fit in his world. He is right. I don't. Because in my world, family means loyalty. In my world, you don't bite the hand that feeds you unless you are ready to starve. I turned to Kendrick. His mouth was open, stammering. "Dad, stop. You are ruining everything." I walked to the front door, the heavy oak door that cost $4,000. I opened it. The fresh air hit my face. It smelled like freedom. It smelled like rain. Dad, Kendrick ran after me, grabbing my arm just as I stepped onto the porch. I stopped. I looked at his hand on my sleeve, the same sleeve he was ashamed of. What I asked. Kendrick looked desperate, but not for me. He looked back at the party, then at me. The caterers, he whispered frantically. "They haven't been paid the final installment yet. They need the credit card on file to close the tab. You You are still going to handle that, right? Before you go, I looked at him, really looked at him. And in that moment, the last thread of hope I had for my son dissolved. I smiled. It was the coldest smile I have ever worn. I don't know, Kendrick. Ask the Italian olive trees. I pulled my arm free, walked to my truck, my old reliable Ford F-150 that Courtney hated, and started the engine. As I drove away, I didn't look back at the mansion. I didn't look back at the son I lost. I reached for my phone and dialed the number for the bank. It was Sunday, but my banker, Mr. Henderson, always answered for me. Orson Henderson said, "Is everything all right?" "No, George," I said, watching the mansion disappear in my rearview mirror. "Everything is wrong, but we are going to fix it. I need you to suspend all activity on the platinum cards, the ones ending in 45 and 88, both of them," Henderson asked. "That is Kendrick and Courtney's main line of credit. Kill them," I said. "And George, cancel the auto pay for the utilities at the Maple Drive estate. Electricity, water, gas, everything." Orson Henderson sounded worried. "That is drastic. Did something happen?" I touched the gold pin in my pocket. I felt the sharp point of the clasp. "I just realized I have been investing in a bad stock, George. I am liquidating my assets." I hung up. The checkbook was closed. The heartbeat, however, was just starting to race. I wasn't sad anymore. I was ready to work. And when Orson Diggs goes to work, things get demolished. I drove my truck straight to the First National Bank on 4th Street. I did not go home to change out of that ridiculous beige suit. I did not stop to grab a bottle of whiskey to drown my sorrows. I had been sober for 20 years, and I was not about to let my ungrateful son drive me back to the bottle. The engine of my Ford was still ticking with heat when I slammed the door shut and marched toward the glass double doors. It was Sunday, but the main branch had a private wealth management office that stayed open for clients like me, clients who built the skyline of this city. George Henderson was waiting for me. I had called ahead. He looked nervous. He was a small man with thin glasses who had managed my accounts since Diggs Electric was just me and a toolbox. He knew how much I loved my son. He knew I had set up those accounts to make sure Kendrick never had to struggle the way I did. But George also knew the look on my face. It was the same look I had when a subcontractor tried to cheat me on drywall pricing. It was the look of a man who was done negotiating. "Sit down, Orson," George said, gesturing to the leather chair. "Can I get you some water?" "No water." "George," I said, remaining standing, "I need a pen and I need your computer unlocked. We have work to do." George typed in his password. His hands were shaking slightly. "Orson, are you sure about this? The penalties for early withdrawal on the trust fund alone will be significant, and the credit lines. If we close them so abruptly, it will impact Kendrick's credit score immediately." I leaned forward. My hands were flat on his mahogany desk. The contrast of my dark, calloused skin against the polished wood was sharp. "Kendrick does not have a credit score, George. I have a credit score. Kendrick has an allowance that he thinks is a salary. He has a lifestyle that he thinks is a birthright. Today, I am correcting a clerical error I made 30 years ago. I am removing the safety net." George nodded and opened the main dashboard. I watched the screen. It was a map of my generosity. There was the mortgage payment for the mansion on Maple Drive set to auto-pay from my primary business account. There were the 2 Platinum Visa cards with limits of $50,000 each. There was the lease agreement for Courtney's Mercedes G-Wagon. There was the monthly transfer for what they called household maintenance, which I knew really went to designer clothes and expensive dinners. Start with the cards I commanded, both of them. Mark them as stolen or lost, no. Mark them as closed by the primary account holder. I want them to know it was me. I want the terminal to flash a code that says account closed by owner. George clicked the mouse. "Done," he said. "Now the utilities," I said. "Who pays the electric bill at Maple Drive? You do, Orson. It comes out of the Real Estate Holding LLC. Cancel it," I said. George looked up, his eyes wide. "Orson, that is illegal in some tenant situations. You have to give notice." I smiled cold and hard. "They are not tenants, George. They don't pay rent. They are guests. And as the homeowner, I am choosing to schedule urgent electrical maintenance, the kind that requires the system to be shut down indefinitely until I can inspect the wiring personally, cut the power, cut the water, cut the high-speed fiber optic internet, cut the pool heating service." George typed faster now, sweat beading on his forehead. He canceled the landscaper. He canceled the private security monitoring. He canceled the weekly maid service. With every click of the mouse, I felt lighter. It wasn't malice. It was the removal of a burden I had carried for too long. I was stripping away the artificial layers of their life. I was taking back my sweat, my labor, my time. And the trust fund, George asked quietly. Freeze it, I said. Invoke the character clause. Section 4, paragraph B. If the beneficiary displays conduct unbecoming of the family values, the trustee has the right to suspend access pending a review. George paused. Did Kendrick do something specific? I thought about the way Kendrick stood silent while his wife wiped my hands like I was a disease. I thought about the way he looked at his shoes while I was being humiliated. He forgot who his father was, I said. That is specific enough. Lock it down. When I walked out of the bank 40 minutes later, I was a lighter man. The sun seemed brighter. I got into my truck and checked my watch. It was 2 p.m. The party was still going on. The champagne was still flowing, but the clock was ticking. I sat in my truck and waited. I wanted to see the fallout. I didn't have to wait long. The first domino fell 20 minutes later. I knew Courtney's schedule. Every Sunday after a big event, she left the cleanup to the staff and went to the Luminous Spa downtown for a decompression facial and massage. It was her ritual. She would spend $600 on creams and stones while I was usually at home heating up leftovers. My phone pinged. It was a notification from the bank app. Transaction declined. Luminous Spa. Amount $645. I chuckled. It was a dry, humorless sound. I imagined the scene. Courtney wrapped in a fluffy white robe, her face covered in some green organic mask, handing over the heavy metal card with that arrogant flick of her wrist. She probably didn't even look at the receptionist. She expected the machine to beep its approval. Instead, silence. Then a second ping. Transaction declined. Luminous Spa. Amount $645. She tried again. She always thought if something didn't work, it was the machine's fault, never hers. Then a third ping. This time the amount was smaller, $10. She was trying to buy a bottle of water or tip the valet. Declined. I closed my eyes and pictured it. The receptionist, a young girl Courtney probably never made eye contact with, having to say the words. I am sorry, Mrs. Diggs. The card has been reported closed. Do you have another form of payment? Courtney didn't carry cash. She said cash was dirty. She didn't have a debit card because she didn't have a job. She was stuck in a spa lobby covered in green goop, with no way to pay and no way to leave. The humiliation would be burning her skin more than any chemical peel. The second domino fell across town. Kendrick. My son loved his vintage Mustang. It was a car I bought him for his 25th birthday. It guzzled gas like a tank. He had driven it to the party to show off. Now he would be heading to the liquor store or to meet his friends for the after party. My phone pinged again. Transaction declined. Shell station on 5th Avenue. Amount $85. Kendrick was standing at a pump, the nozzle in his hand, watching the screen flash, see cashier. There were probably 3 cars behind him honking. Kendrick hated confrontation. He crumbled under pressure. He would be sweating now, tapping his card against the reader, praying for a miracle. But miracles cost money, and his God had just cut off the supply. Then the final blow. The house. I had timed the utility cut with a friend of mine at the power company. I called in a favor. It was technically a service interruption for safety inspection. The text came from the security system backup battery. Main power lost. Wi-Fi connection lost. Smart home hub offline. The mansion on Maple Drive was a smart home. Everything was controlled by the internet. The locks, the blinds, the thermostat, the fridge. When the power died and the internet cut, the house became a tomb. The music at the party would have cut out instantly. The air conditioning, fighting the humid afternoon heat, would grind to a halt. The electronic gates at the driveway would default to their locked position, trapping everyone inside, unless they manually cranked them open. My phone began to ring. It was Courtney. I let it ring. I watched the name flash on the screen. The picture she had set was a selfie of her and Kendrick on a yacht I paid for. They looked so happy, so rich, so oblivious. The ringing stopped, then it started again immediately. This time it was Kendrick. I picked up on the last ring. I didn't say hello. I just listened. Dad, Dad, what is going on? Kendrick's voice was high-pitched with panic. I am at the gas station and the card isn't working. The guy is threatening to call the cops if I don't pay for the gas I already pumped. And Courtney just called me screaming that she is being held hostage at the spa because her cards are dead. What is happening? Is the identity theft protection kicking in? Did we get hacked? I started the engine of my truck. The rumble of the V8 was comforting. No Kendrick. I said, my voice steady as a concrete foundation. You didn't get hacked, you got fired. What? What are you talking about? Fix this. Transfer the money. Courtney is crying. Dad, I put the truck in gear. She is crying, I asked. Does she have a tissue? Or does she need $50,000 for an imported Italian handkerchief? Dad, this isn't funny, Kendrick screamed. I am stranded. You have legs, Kendrick, I said, and you have a brain. Use one to get home and the other to figure out why you are standing there. But Dad, the checkbook is closed, son. The heartbeat is still going, but it is beating for me now. Figure it out. I hung up the phone. I tossed it onto the passenger seat. I drove toward the highway. I wasn't going back to my empty house. I was going to a steakhouse. I was going to order a ribeye medium rare, and I was going to pay for it with my own cash with my own hands. The chaos I left behind was not my problem. It was their curriculum. The semester had just begun and the tuition was going to be expensive. As I merged onto the freeway, I saw storm clouds gathering over the direction of Maple Drive. Good. Let it rain. Let it wash away the pastels. Let them see what the world looks like when you don't have a golden umbrella. I felt a vibration in my pocket. Another notification. But this one wasn't a decline. It was a voicemail from Courtney. I didn't listen to it yet. I knew what it would contain. Threats, anger, venom. She would not understand. Not yet. She thought this was a tantrum. She didn't realize it was an eviction from the life she thought she owned. I turned on the radio. Some old blues song was playing. A man singing about hard work and hard times. I turned it up. For the first time in years, the music sounded right. I was alone, yes, but I was free, and tomorrow the real demolition would begin. I steered my truck away from the manicured lawns of the suburbs and headed toward the south side. The sky was turning a bruised purple as the sun went down, matching the feeling in my chest. I was not going home to an empty house. I needed answers, and I knew exactly where to find them. I pulled up in front of a faded brick building on 52nd Street. The sign above the door said Mo's 24-hour laundromat. But the real business happened in the back office. Mo was a man I had known since we were both young and foolish running the streets before I found electricity and he found trouble. I had bailed him out of a tight spot 20 years ago, gave him a job when no one else would, and helped him set up his private investigation license. He owed me his life and he never forgot it. When I walked in, the air smelled of detergent and stale cigarette smoke. Mo was sitting behind a metal desk that looked like it had survived a war. He was a mountain of a man with skin the color of obsidian and a scar running from his ear to his jawline. When he saw me, he didn't smile. He knew that if Orson Diggs was on the south side on a Sunday night wearing a beige suit, something was terribly wrong. Mr. Diggs Mo said, his voice like gravel in a mixer. "You look like you just came from a funeral." I sat down on the folding chair opposite him. The metal was cold against my back. Not a funeral, Mo. An awakening. I need you to work. Mo closed the magazine he was reading. He leaned forward, his eyes serious. Name it. I need a full financial autopsy on Kendrick and his wife. I need to know where every dime I gave them went. And I need to know why Courtney was so desperate for $50,000 today that she insulted me in front of half the city. Mo didn't ask questions. He didn't ask why I was investigating my own son. He simply nodded and turned to his computer. For the next 2 hours, the only sound in the room was the clicking of his keyboard and the hum of the washing machines out front. I watched him work. Mo wasn't a hacker from the movies. He was a digger. He knew people at the credit bureaus. He knew people at the banks. He knew how to follow the trail of breadcrumbs that stupid people leave behind. I sat there staring at a water stain on the ceiling, replaying the scene at the christening over and over. A checkbook with a heartbeat. The words echoed in my head, getting louder each time. I wondered if I was the fool. Etta had warned me. She had told me that giving Kendrick too much too soon would cripple him. I had argued that I just wanted him to have the childhood I never had. Now sitting in the back of a laundromat, I realized I had bought him a handicap, not a head start. "Got it," Mo said abruptly. The silence broke. I looked at him. His face was grim. He didn't look at me. He looked at the printer as it started to whir and spit out pages. "Orson, you are not going to like this," Mo warned, grabbing the fresh stack of warm paper. "Give it to me," I said. Mo slid the stack across the desk. I put on my reading glasses. My hands were steady, but my stomach was churning acid. The first page was about Kendrick. Employment status, it read. Terminated. I looked at the date. March 14th. "He was fired 6 months ago," I whispered. Mo nodded. "They let him go for gross incompetence and frequent absences. He never told you." I shook my head. Every morning, Kendrick left the house in a suit. Every evening, he came home complaining about his boss. He had been looking me in the eye for half a year, lying about a job he didn't have. "So, where does he go all day?" I asked. Mo tapped a few keys. "Credit card records show he spends a lot of time at the upscale coffee shop on 4th, then the park, then usually a bar around 2 p.m. He is playing pretend Orson. He is pretending to be a businessman because he is terrified you will find out he failed." I felt a sharp pain in my chest. My son was a failure, yes, but the cowardice hurt more. He was playing dress-up while I paid his mortgage. I turned the page. This was Courtney's file. If Kendrick's file was a tragedy, Courtney's was a horror show. The numbers were staggering. The girl didn't just have debt, she was drowning in it. Total outstanding credit card debt, $212,000. I gasped. How is that even possible? I give them $10,000 a month for expenses. "Look at the statements," Mo said, pointing a thick finger at the itemized list. I looked. It was a sickness. Gucci, Prada, Saks Fifth Avenue. But then I saw something else. Returns. There were thousands of dollars in returns, but the credit wasn't going back to pay the debt. The refunds were going into a separate secret account in her maiden name. "She is buying clothes to wear once for Instagram photos," Mo explained, his voice filled with disgust. "She keeps the tags on, takes the picture, gets the likes, and then returns them. But she is spending the cash refunds on something else." "On what?" I asked. "Online gambling," Mo said softly, "and buying social media followers. She pays a service $5,000 a month just to keep her follower count high. She is paying to be famous Orson, and she is bad at poker." I looked at the bottom of the page. There was a loan highlighted in red. It wasn't from a bank, it was from a payday loan company known for breaking kneecaps if you missed a payment. The balance due was exactly $48,000, the $50,000 for the olive trees, I realized. She didn't want trees, she wanted to pay off the sharks. Mo nodded. "She is underwater Orson. She is maxed out. That 50 grand was probably her last chance to keep the loan sharks away before the interest compounded again." I sat back in the metal chair. The stack of papers felt heavy in my hand. It weighed more than the bricks I used to carry on construction sites. This was the weight of betrayal. I had been funding a fantasy. I had been working 14-hour days, managing crews, dealing with inspectors, and sweating in the sun, all to pay for my son to sit in a park and for his wife to gamble away my legacy on an illusion of fame. "They are not just ungrateful, Mo," I said, my voice quiet and dangerous. "They are frauds." Mo looked at me with deep sympathy. "What are you going to do, Orson?" I stood up. I folded the papers and tucked them into the inside pocket of my jacket right next to the check I had taken back. "I am going to let gravity do its work," I said. "They have been living in a castle made of clouds. I just turned off the anti-gravity machine. Now I am going to watch them hit the ground." "You need me to do anything else?" Mo asked. "Keep digging," I said. "Find out about her family. She talks about them like they are royalty from Connecticut. I have a feeling that is a lie too. If I am going to tear this down, I want to tear it down to the bedrock." Mo nodded. "Consider it done." I walked out of the laundromat and back into the night. The city lights were twinkling in the distance, indifferent to my pain. I got into my truck and placed the dossier on the passenger seat. It sat there like a passenger, a silent witness to the end of my patience. I picked up my phone. There were 12 missed calls from Kendrick, 4 from Courtney, and 1 text message from Courtney that simply said, "We need to talk. You are being unreasonable." I laughed. It was a dark, hollow sound, unreasonable. I started the engine. I wasn't going to talk. Talking was for people who had options. They didn't have options anymore. They had secrets, and now those secrets belonged to me. I was no longer just a father or a checkbook. I was the auditor, and the audit was just beginning. I pulled the truck onto the main road, heading nowhere in particular, just driving to feel the motion, knowing that back at the mansion the darkness was literal. But for me, the light was finally breaking through. The silence in my house did not last long. It was broken the next morning by a pounding on my front door that sounded less like a visitor and more like a police raid. I was in the kitchen drinking black coffee and reading the paper. I knew who it was before I even stood up. A father knows the sound of his child's desperation. It has a specific rhythm. I opened the door to find Kendrick standing there. He looked like a man who had slept in his clothes. His shirt was wrinkled. His eyes were bloodshot. He did not say hello. He did not ask how I was. He pushed past me into the living room, pacing back and forth on the hardwood floors I had installed with my own knees and back 30 years ago. "You have to turn it back on, Dad," Kendrick said, his voice cracking. "This isn't funny anymore. The power company said they can't come out for 3 days because there is a flagged work order on the meter. 3 days. Do you know what happens to a smart house with no power for 3 days? The security system is down. The food in the sub-zero fridge is rotting. Courtney is losing her mind." I took a sip of my coffee. I stood in the doorway watching him unravel. "It sounds like you have a logistics problem, Kendrick. Not a daddy problem." Kendrick stopped pacing. He turned to me, his face twisted in a mix of anger and disbelief. "Logistics. We have no money. I went to the ATM this morning to get cash for breakfast, and the machine ate my card. It said the issuer retained it. That was you, wasn't it? You embarrassed me at a gas station, and now you are embarrassing me at a bank. Why are you doing this? Is this because of the olive trees? We can forget the trees. Just turn the money back on." He still didn't get it. He thought this was a negotiation. He thought this was about trees or insults. He didn't understand that I was trying to save his soul by starving his ego. I walked over to the mantel and picked up a framed photo of him when he was 10 years old. He was holding a wrench, helping me fix a sink. He looked so proud back then. "I am not doing this because of the trees, son. I am doing this because you are 32 years old and you don't know the price of milk. I am doing this because you stood there and watched your wife treat me like a servant in a house I paid for. You are not a man, Kendrick. You are a pet, and I am tired of buying the kibble." Kendrick's face went dark. The desperation turned into something ugly. Entitlement. A pet, he spat the word out. "I am your son, you owe me this. Mom wanted me to have a good life. She didn't want me crawling under houses like you. Don't you speak her name?" I said, my voice dropping an octave. "Your mother wanted you to have character. She didn't want you to be a leech. Get out of my house, Kendrick. Go home to your wife. Figure it out together. That is what marriage is. It is solving problems, not begging for bailouts." Kendrick walked to the door. He stopped and looked back at me. There was no love in his eyes, only cold calculation. "You are going to regret this, old man. You think you hold all the cards because you have the money. But Courtney has a voice, and people listen to her. You want to play hardball? Fine. We will play." He slammed the door so hard the pictures on the wall rattled. I finished my coffee. It tasted bitter. I thought the worst was over. I thought he would go home, cry, and then maybe start looking for a job. I underestimated Courtney. I underestimated the weaponization of victimhood. 2 hours later, my phone started vibrating. It wasn't a call. It was a notification. Then another. Then 100. It sounded like a swarm of angry bees on my kitchen table. I picked it up. My niece Sarah had sent me a link with a message that just said, "Uncle Orson, you need to see this. Now." I clicked the link. It was a Facebook post. A public post from Courtney Diggs. It had been up for 40 minutes and already had 5,000 shares. The picture was black and white. It showed Courtney sitting on the floor of the darkened mansion holding Leo, looking terrified. The lighting was dramatic. She looked like a refugee in a war zone, not a woman in $1 million home. The caption read, "I never thought I would share this, but I am terrified for my safety and the safety of my son. For years I have tried to be a good daughter-in-law. I have tried to bridge the cultural gap, but today the mask fell off. My husband's father, Orson Diggs, has cut off our power, our water, and our financial resources. He has trapped us in a dark house with a 6-month-old baby. Why? Because I stood up to his controlling, toxic behavior. Because I refused to let him dictate how we raise our child. She continued, and this was the part that made my blood run cold. He has always hated me. He has made it clear that I am not welcome in his family because of the color of my skin. He calls me an outsider. He mocks my heritage. It is a painful reality that reverse racism exists, and today it has left a young mother and her baby destitute. He is a powerful, wealthy man who is using his money to abuse us. Please, share this. We need help. We need protection from this monster. Hashtag toxic family. Hashtag surviving. Orson. Hashtag justice. For Leo. I lowered the phone. My hand was shaking. Not from fear, but from rage. Reverse racism. She was accusing me, a black man who grew up in the Jim Crow South, of racism. A man who had been denied loans, denied contracts, and denied service because of his skin. A man who had been spat on walking to school. She was taking my history, my pain, and wearing it like a costume to get sympathy. The comments were pouring in. Strangers from all over the country were calling me a monster. They were tagging the local news stations. They were tagging the police. "What kind of man does this to a baby?" one comment read. "Boycott Diggs Electric," wrote another. "Someone should go over there and teach this old guy a lesson," wrote a third. Then my business line started ringing. It was my foreman, Mike. "Boss, we have a problem," Mike said, his voice tight. "We just got a call from the developers at the Riverside project. They want to pause the contract. They said they can't be associated with a domestic abuser. They saw the post Orson. It is everywhere." I hung up. Then the church deacon called. "Orson, brother, the pastor is worried. We are getting calls. People are saying we shouldn't have you on the building committee. Is it true? Did you really leave a baby in the dark?" I didn't answer. I couldn't answer. If I tried to explain, I would look defensive. In the court of public opinion, the first person to cry is the victim, and the silent one is the villain. Courtney knew exactly what she was doing. She wasn't just attacking my bank account, she was attacking my name. She was trying to burn down the reputation I had spent 40 years building just to force me to open the checkbook again. She wanted me to panic. She wanted me to call her, begging her to take the post down, promising to restore the cards, promising to pay for the olive trees and the spa days just to make the noise stop. I walked to the window. I looked out at the street. I half expected to see a mob with pitchforks. I looked at the phone again. The shares were up to 7,000. She was winning. In her mind, she was winning. I took a deep breath. I channeled Etta. Be the water, she used to say. But sometimes water isn't enough. Sometimes you need to be the flood. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I needed, Lydia Stone. Lydia was not a family lawyer. She was a shark in a pencil skirt. She handled hostile takeovers and corporate litigation. She was the most expensive lawyer in the state, and she terrified grown men. I pressed call. She answered on the second ring. "Orson," Lydia said. Her voice was cool, crisp, unbothered. "I saw the post. My paralegal is already drafting a cease and desist for defamation. Do you want me to send it?" "No, Lydia," I said. I was staring at the reflection of my own eyes in the window. They looked tired, but they looked fierce. Defamation is a civil suit. It takes too long. She wants a war. She wants to play the victim. Fine, let's give her a real reason to cry. "What do you have in mind?" Lydia asked. "I want you to pull the deed for the Maple Drive property, the one the LLC holds." "I have it right here," she said. "Draft an eviction notice," I said, "but not a standard 30-day notice. I want you to invoke the morals clause in the occupancy agreement, the one that says tenants can be removed immediately if they engage in conduct that damages the reputation of the property owner." Lydia paused. I could hear her smile through the phone. "Orson, that is aggressive. If we do that, the sheriff will be there by tomorrow morning. They will be on the street." "Good," I said. "And Orson," Lydia added, "if we do this, there is no going back. This destroys the relationship permanently. The relationship was destroyed the moment she used my skin color as a weapon to cover her gambling debts," I said. I paused. I watched a car drive slowly past my house. Someone inside held up a phone filming. The vultures were circling. "They want to tell the world I made them homeless," I asked, my voice low and steady. "They want to play the victim for likes and shares. Okay, I will make their story come true. I am going to make them homeless for real. Print the papers." Lydia, I will meet the sheriff at the gate at 700 hours and bring a camera crew. If she wants a show, let's give her a season finale. I hung up the phone. The buzzing continued. The hate continued. But I felt calm. I was no longer the father trying to teach a lesson. I was the general engaging the enemy. They had fired the first shot, but they had forgotten one thing. I owned the battlefield. And tomorrow I was bringing in the heavy artillery. Lydia Stone's office was on the 42nd floor of a glass tower that looked down on the city like a silent god. The view was expensive, but the woman sitting behind the desk was priceless. Lydia was the kind of lawyer who didn't just win cases. She annihilated the opposition so thoroughly that they thanked her for letting them surrender. She wore a white suit that was sharper than a scalpel, and her eyes were cold, calculating, and absolutely brilliant. I sat opposite her in a leather chair that cost more than my first truck. I placed my phone on her desk. The screen was still displaying Courtney's viral post, the one accusing me of racism and abuse. The likes were ticking up. The comments were getting uglier. Lydia glanced at it, her expression unchanging. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. "She is sloppy, Orson," Lydia said, sliding the phone back to me. "She is emotional. She thinks this is a court of public opinion, but she forgets that we live in a world of contracts and clauses." "Amateur mistake," I nodded. "I didn't come here for sympathy, Lydia. I came here for an eviction." Lydia tapped a file folder on her desk. I had asked her to pull the deed and the occupancy agreement for the Maple Drive house. I had set that house up under a limited liability company, Diggs Holdings, LLC, for tax purposes. Kendrick and Courtney signed a lease agreement 3 years ago. It was a formality, I told them at the time. Just paperwork to keep the accountants happy. The rent was set at $1 per year. $1. They had never even paid that. I used to joke about it. Now that joke was the key to their destruction. Lydia opened the file. Her manicured finger traced a paragraph on the 3rd page. "Here it is," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. "Clause 14, Section B, the Conduct and Reputation Clause. It states that the tenant agrees not to engage in any activity, public or private, that brings disrepute, scandal, or financial harm to the landlord or the property management company." She looked up at me. "By posting that defamatory lie on social media, she didn't just hurt your feelings, Orson. She publicly attacked the owner of the property. She attacked the brand of Diggs Holdings. She breached the contract." I leaned forward. "So we don't have to wait 30 days. Lydia shook her head. "Number. This is a material breach of lease. We can file for an emergency eviction order, immediate possession. We argue that their continued presence on the property poses a threat to the landlord's business interests. The judge will sign it. I can have the sheriff there by sunrise." I looked at the document. It was just paper. But in the right hands, paper is sharper than steel. "Do it," I said. Lydia pulled a fountain pen from her pocket. "Orson, I need you to understand what this means. Once we serve this, they are out. The locks get changed. Their belongings get put on the curb or in storage. This is traumatic. This is final. Are you sure you want to do this to your son?" I thought about Kendrick standing in my living room demanding I turn the money back on while his wife slandered my name to thousands of strangers. I thought about the way he looked at his shoes while she wiped my black hands. He made his choice. "Lydia," I said, my voice steady. "He chose the lie. I am just choosing the truth. The truth is that house is a business asset, and right now it is housing a liability." "Evict them!" Lydia signed the paper. The sound of the pen scratching against the page was the loudest sound in the room. It sounded like a guillotine dropping. "I will call Sheriff Miller," she said. "Meet him at the gate at 0700 hours. And Orson, wear a suit. If she's going to play the media game, you need to look like the CEO you are." I stood up and buttoned my jacket. "I will wear the black one," I said. "It is a funeral for their lifestyle after all." The next morning the sky was a bruised gray. It was 7 o'clock sharp when I pulled my truck up to the wrought iron gates of the Maple Drive estate. The air was cold and damp. The fog clung to the manicured hedges like a ghost. Sheriff Miller was already there. He was a good man, a man I had fished with, a man who knew the difference between right and wrong. He leaned against his cruiser holding a folded document. He didn't look happy, but he looked ready. "Morning, Orson," he said, tipping his hat. "You sure about this morning, Jim?" I replied, stepping out of the truck. "I have never been more sure of anything. Let's get it done." We walked up the long driveway. The house was dark. The power was still out, so the windows looked like dead eyes staring back at us. There was no movement inside. They were likely still asleep, huddled under expensive duvets, dreaming that their social media fame would save them. Jim pounded on the heavy oak door. The sound echoed through the morning silence like a gunshot. Sheriff's Department, open up. Nothing happened for a moment. Then I heard the shuffling of feet. I heard a voice shrill and panicked. It was Courtney. Hold on. Who is it? Sheriff's Department, Jim repeated. We have a court order. Open the door or we will breach it. The lock clicked. The door swung open. Courtney stood there wrapped in a silk robe. She looked disheveled. Her hair was messy, her eyes puffy. But in her hand she held her phone. The camera was already recording. The little red light was blinking. She was live. Oh my God, guys, she said to the phone, pitching her voice into a sob. You won't believe this. It is 7 in the morning and the police are at my door. My father-in-law sent the police. She turned the camera toward me. I stood there in my black suit, my face impassive. I looked straight into the lens. I didn't blink. Jim stepped forward. Mrs. Diggs, this is an order of immediate eviction for breach of lease. You and your husband have 2 hours to vacate the premises. Courtney let out a theatrical scream. She dropped to her knees, making sure the camera caught the angle. Eviction. You are kicking us out. We have a baby. You are throwing a baby on the street because I spoke the truth. Look at him, guys. Look at this monster. She pointed the phone at me again. The comments were probably flying by on her screen. Poor Courtney. Evil Orson. Kendrick appeared behind her. He looked terrified. He saw me and stopped. Dad, please. Not like this. I walked past Jim. I walked past Kendrick. I stepped into the foyer of the house I built. The air inside was stale. It smelled of expensive perfume covering up the scent of rotting garbage. I am here to conduct a final inventory of the landlord's assets, I announced, my voice booming off the high ceilings. Courtney scrambled to her feet, chasing me with the phone. He is invading our home, she shrieked. He is trying to intimidate us. Tell the world what you are doing, Orson. Tell them how you hate us. I stopped in the living room. I turned to face her. I turned to face the thousands of people watching on her little screen. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out a weapon. I pulled out a stack of paper. You say I am evicting you because of a Facebook post, I said, looking directly into the camera lens. But that is only half the story, Courtney. The truth is, this house is for people who pay their bills. I held up the first piece of paper. It was an invoice. Courtney zoomed in, thinking I was holding up an eviction notice, but she froze when she saw what it really was. This is a receipt from yesterday afternoon, I said calmly. While you were posting about starving in the dark, while you were begging strangers for sympathy money, you made an online purchase using a credit card you thought was hidden. Courtney's face went pale. Stop it, she hissed. Don't you dare. I read from the paper. 1 Hermes Birkin bag. Vintage leather. Price $12,000. Paid in full. Shipped to your mother's address in Connecticut so I wouldn't see it. I dropped the paper on the floor. It fluttered down like a dead leaf. I pulled out another paper, and this I continued. A receipt for $5,000 sent to a company called Social Boost. A company that sells fake likes and bot comments. You didn't get 5,000 shares because people care, Courtney. You got them because you paid for them with the money meant for your son's college fund. Kendrick stepped forward. His eyes were wide. What? You bought a bag yesterday. We couldn't buy milk. Courtney. Courtney lowered the phone. The live stream was still running, but she had forgotten her audience. She turned on Kendrick. Shut up. I needed it for the image. I needed to look strong. I stepped closer to the camera. The viewers were watching the mask slip. They were watching the victim turn into the villain in real time. This isn't a home, I said to the audience. This is a storage unit for her ego. And the rent is overdue. I turned to Jim. Sheriff, proceed with the removal. Jim nodded. Okay, folks. You heard the man. Grab what you need for the baby. Leave the furniture. Leave the electronics. Leave anything that is attached to the walls. You have 1 hour and 50 minutes left. Courtney looked at her phone. The comments had changed. I could see them scrolling fast. Is that true? She bought a bag. She is a scammer. Team Orson. She ended the stream with a trembling finger. The silence that followed was heavy. You ruined me, she whispered, looking at me with pure hatred. No, I said, turning my back on her to inspect a scratch on the hardwood floor. I just turned the lights on. It is not my fault you are ugly when you are illuminated. Kendrick stood in the middle of the room looking from me to his wife. He looked like a man waking up from a long coma. "Dad," he started. "Save it, Kendrick," I said, running my hand along the fireplace mantel. "Pack your boxes, and be careful with the walls. If you scratch the paint, I will deduct it from the security deposit. Not that you ever paid one." I walked to the window and watched the sun finally break through the fog. Behind me, the sound of weeping began. But this time, it wasn't for the camera. It was the sound of reality crashing down, and I let it be the soundtrack to my mourning. The house was being purged, the infection was being removed, and for the first time in years, the air in this mansion was starting to feel clean. I thought I had won the battle at the gates of the Maple Drive mansion. I thought that stripping them of the luxury they had not earned would force them to face reality. I expected anger. I expected tantrums. I even expected a lawsuit over the eviction. But I did not expect Courtney to reach into the gutter and pull out a weapon so dirty that even I was not prepared for the blow. I forgot that when you corner a rat, it does not fight fair. It aims for the throat, and my throat was my grandson, Leo. 2 days after the eviction, the silence from their end was deafening. I knew they were staying at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town because my private investigator, Mo, was tracking their movement. I knew they were desperate. I assumed they were scrambling to find jobs or begging Courtney's parents in Connecticut for a wire transfer. I sat in my home, the home I had built with my own hands, and I felt a pang of worry. Not for them, but for the baby. Leo did not ask to be born into a war zone. He did not ask for a father who was a coward or a mother who was a narcissist. I decided to be the bigger man. I went to the store and bought 3 boxes of premium formula, the expensive kind that Courtney insisted Leo needed because of his delicate stomach. I bought diapers. I bought warm clothes because I knew that motel had drafty windows. I was not going to give them cash, but I was not going to let my blood starve. I loaded the truck and drove to the motel. I intended to drop the supplies at the front desk and leave. I did not want a confrontation. I just wanted to make sure the boy was fed. I pulled into the parking lot of the motel. It was a sad place with flickering neon signs and potholes that could swallow a tire. I saw Courtney's Mercedes G-Wagon parked in the back looking ridiculous next to the rusted sedans and work trucks. It was covered in dust, the symbol of their fallen empire. I grabbed the boxes and walked toward the lobby. Before I could even reach the door, a police cruiser pulled in fast, blocking my path. Then another. Blue and red lights flashed against the gray stucco walls of the motel. I stopped. I assumed they were here for a domestic dispute in one of the rooms. This was that kind of place. I stepped aside to let the officers pass. But they did not pass. 2 officers stepped out, hands resting near their holsters. They were young. They did not know who I was. They did not know Orson Diggs, the pillar of the community. They just saw a large black man holding boxes in a parking lot. "Sir, put the boxes down," the first officer commanded. His voice was tense. I looked at him. "I am just delivering baby formula, officer. My son is staying here. Put the boxes down now," he yelled, unbuttoning the strap on his holster. I slowly lowered the boxes to the cracked asphalt. I raised my hands. I had been a black man in America for 68 years. I knew the drill. I knew that one wrong move, one flash of irritation could end my life right there between a dumpster and a vending machine. "Turn around," the officer said. "Hands on the vehicle." I did as I was told. The cold metal of the police car pressed against my cheek. I felt hands patting me down, checking for weapons. They found nothing but my wallet and my phone. "What is this about?" I asked, keeping my voice calm. "I have done nothing wrong." "We received a 911 call regarding an imminent threat," the officer said. "The caller stated that you were on your way here to forcefully take a minor child." I froze. Forcefully take a child. "Kidnapping. That is a lie," I said. "I brought diapers. Look in the boxes." The officer spun me around. He held up a piece of paper. It was not a ticket, it was a court order. A temporary restraining order. "Orson Diggs, you are hereby served," the officer said. "You are ordered to stay 500 yards away from Courtney Diggs, Kendrick Diggs, and the minor child Leo Diggs. You are to have no contact, direct or indirect. You are to surrender any firearms immediately." I stared at the paper. The words swam before my eyes. Petition for protection from domestic violence. The applicant was Courtney. In the statement of facts, she had written a story that made me sick to my stomach. She claimed that at the christening I had violently snatched a piece of jewelry from the baby's crib and screamed that I was taking what was mine. She claimed I had a history of volatile outbursts. She claimed I had threatened to take Leo away from his mother because I deemed her unfit due to her race. She had taken the truth and twisted it into a noose. She took the moment I reclaimed my grandfather's brooch, a moment of heritage and dignity, and painted it as an act of aggression. And because she was a crying mother and I was a large, angry-looking man, the judge had signed the order without asking a single question. I am not a violent man, I told the officer. This is a retaliation because I evicted them. That is for the judge to decide in 14 days, the officer said. Right now, if you take one step closer to room 104, I will arrest you. Do you understand? I looked past the officer's shoulder. The curtain of room 104 moved. I saw a face. It was Courtney. She was holding Leo. She wasn't looking at me with fear. She was smiling. A small, triumphant smile. She had found the one thing money could not fix. She had used the law to steal my grandson. I got back in my truck. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the steering wheel. I left the formula on the ground. I drove away, the blue lights fading in my rearview mirror, but the image of that restraining order burned into my retina. The humiliation did not end at the motel. Courtney made sure of that. The next morning, a different kind of police car pulled up to my house. It was not the local patrol. It was the sheriff's deputies who handled weapon surrenders. I opened the door. My neighbors were outside, watering their lawns, walking their dogs. They stopped. They watched. They saw the deputies enter my home. They saw me bring out my grandfather's antique hunting rifle, the one that hadn't been fired in 40 years. They saw me hand it over like a criminal. The rumor mill started instantly. I received texts from members of the church. Brother Orson, is it true the police raided your house? Is it true you threatened your daughter-in-law with a gun? Courtney had posted a photo of the restraining order on social media. She captioned it, "Thank you to the brave officers who protected my baby today. We are safe now, but we are shaken. Please pray for us as we navigate this nightmare." She did not mention the formula I left on the pavement. She did not mention the diapers. She only mentioned her fear. I sat in my living room, the empty gun rack staring at me. I felt powerless. For the first time in my life, my money, my connections, my reputation meant nothing. The law is a blunt instrument, and she was wielding it like a club. She knew that by the time we got to court, by the time I proved my innocence, weeks would have passed. Weeks where I could not see Leo. Weeks where she could poison Kendrick's mind further. And where was Kendrick? That was the question that haunted me. I found the answer later that day. Mo sent me a video file. He had been parked across the street during the confrontation at the motel. The video showed me driving away. Then it showed the door of room 104 opening. Kendrick walked out. He picked up the boxes of formula and diapers I had left. He looked at them. He knew I had bought them. He knew his father's heart. He hesitated for a second. Then Courtney stepped out. She said something to him. He slumped his shoulders. He carried the boxes inside. He took my charity, but he let me keep the shame. I watched the video 3 times. I watched my son, the boy I raised to be a king, acting like a servant to a woman who had just labeled his father a predator. I turned off the computer. I sat in the dark. The restraining order was a wall, a high, thick wall meant to keep me out. But Courtney had forgotten one thing about Orson Diggs. I was a contractor. I built walls, and I tore them down. She thought this piece of paper was a shield. She did not realize it was a declaration of total war. She wanted to use the law, fine. I would use the law, but I would not use it to hide. I would use it to expose. I picked up the phone and called Lydia. "Lydia," I said. My voice was raspy. "Orson," she said. "I saw the order. We can fight this. We can get an emergency hearing." "No," I said. "Let the order stand for now. Let her feel safe. Let her think she won. But I want you to open a new file." "What file?" Lydia asked. "Custody," I said. "I am not just fighting for visitation anymore. I am fighting for full custody." She proved today that she is willing to use a child as a pawn in a game of financial extortion. That is abuse. "It will be ugly," Orson Lydia warned. "We will have to drag every skeleton out of her closet. We will have to destroy her character completely." "She has no character to destroy," I replied. "She burnt it all to keep warm." "Start the paperwork, Lydia, and find out everything about her family in Connecticut. She lied about the kidnapping. I want to know what else she is lying about." I hung up. I walked to the nursery I had set up in my house for Leo. It was empty. The crib was empty. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the gold brooch. The diamond sparkled in the dim light. "I will come for you, Leo," I whispered to the empty room. "Grandpa is coming, and I am bringing the wrecking ball." The restraining order was a piece of paper, but it felt like a concrete wall wrapped in razor wire. For 3 days, I sat in my silent house, staring at the phone, waiting for a call that would never come. My lawyers told me to be patient. They told me that the wheels of justice turn slowly. But I knew better. In the construction business, if you wait too long, the cement hardens and you are stuck with a foundation that is crooked forever. I could not wait for a court date. I could not wait for a judge to see through Courtney's tears. I needed to act, but I could not use force. Force had gotten me here. I had to use leverage. I remembered something Etta used to say when we went fishing. She would say, "Orson, if the fish aren't biting, change the bait. They don't want the worm, give them the shine." Courtney and Kendrick did not fear the angry father anymore. They had the police for that. But there was one thing they were terrified of losing: the inheritance. They thought I was a monster, yes, but they also thought I was an immortal monster who would hold on to his money forever. If I wanted to draw them out, I had to show them the one thing they wanted more than my destruction. My end. I drove to St. Jude's Hospital on a Tuesday morning. I walked into the emergency room, not as Orson Diggs, the CEO, but as an old man who had forgotten where he parked his truck. I let my hand tremble. I let my speech slur just a little when I spoke to the nurse. I complained of dizziness. I complained of confusion. Within an hour, I was admitted for observation. I called my assistant Brenda and gave her very specific instructions. I told her to cancel my meetings. I told her to sound worried. I told her to let it slip to the church prayer chain that Orson Diggs had suffered a mini-stroke and was not making much sense. News in our community travels faster than fiber optics. I knew it would reach Kendrick before lunch, and I knew exactly how they would react. They would not come out of concern. They would come to assess the damage. They would come to see if the king was finally dying so they could measure the crown for their own heads. I lay in the hospital bed hooked up to a monitor that beeped in a steady rhythm. The room smelled of antiseptic and floor wax. I hated it. It reminded me of Etta's last days, but I forced myself to stay still. I stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the dots, waiting for the vultures to circle. It was 3 p.m. when the door opened. They walked in cautiously. Kendrick was wearing a tracksuit, looking like he hadn't shaved in days. Courtney was dressed perfectly as always in a designer trench coat, holding a cup of coffee. She didn't bring flowers. She didn't bring a card. She brought her ambition. I closed my eyes halfway. I let my mouth hang open slightly. I made my breathing sound shallow. Dad, Kendrick whispered. He sounded scared. But was he scared for me or scared of me? I turned my head slowly. I focused on them, blinking rapidly as if I was having trouble recognizing their faces. "Kenny," I rasped. "Is that you, son?" Kendrick stepped closer to the bed. "Yeah, Dad. It is me. We heard you. We heard you had an episode." I tried to sit up, then fell back against the pillows, letting out a weak groan. My hand shook as I reached for the water cup on the tray. I knocked it over on purpose. Water spilled onto the linoleum floor. "I'm sorry," I mumbled, wiping my hand on the sheet. "My hands, they don't work right today. Nothing works right. I don't know why I'm here." Courtney stepped forward. She was watching me like a hawk watching a dying rabbit. Her eyes were scanning my face, looking for a lie. But I was not lying. I was acting, and I was channeling every ounce of exhaustion I had felt for the last 30 years. "The doctors say it is stress," Orson, Courtney said, her voice devoid of warmth. "They say your blood pressure is through the roof. You are confused." I looked at her. I tried to look pathetic. "Courtney," I said softly, "I am sorry about the trees. I am sorry about the house. I don't know what came over me. I feel so tired. I feel like I am losing my grip." She exchanged a look with Kendrick. It was a look of pure excitement. They weren't seeing a father apologizing. They were seeing an obstacle crumbling. Kendrick sat on the edge of the bed. "Dad, you are pushing yourself too hard. You are 68. You can't keep running the company. You can't keep fighting everyone. Look at you. You are shaking." "I am scared, Kenny," I whispered. "I forgot the code to the safe this morning. I forgot your mother's birthday. What is happening to me?" Courtney moved in for the kill. She put a hand on Kendrick's shoulder, squeezing it. Orson listened to us, she said, her tone businesslike. We have been talking. We want what is best for you. Staying in that big, empty house all alone. It is dangerous. What if you fall? What if you have another episode and no one is there? I looked down at my hands. I don't want to be alone, I admitted. That was the only true thing I said. We found a place, Courtney said quickly. It is called Sunset Hills. It is a premier assisted living facility. They have nurses 24/7. They have therapy. It is like a resort, really. You would be safe there. Sunset Hills. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the wealthy elderly. A place where children dumped their parents so they could spend their inheritance without guilt. It cost $15,000 a month, and the residents spent their days staring at a television in a drugged haze. A home? I asked, my voice trembling. You want to put me in a home? It is not a home, Dad Kendrick said, avoiding my eyes. It is a community. You need rest. You need to let go of the stress. And the company, I asked. Who will run Diggs Electric, the contracts, the payroll? Courtney pulled a folder from her designer bag. She had brought paperwork. Of course she had. We can help with that too, she said, opening the folder. We spoke to a lawyer. If you sign a temporary power of attorney, Kendrick can step in as interim CEO, just until you get better. He can sign the checks. He can manage the accounts. We can take the burden off your shoulders. I stared at the paper. It wasn't temporary. I could see the wording from here. Durable power of attorney. It would give them control over everything. My bank accounts, my real estate, my medical decisions. If I signed this, they could declare me incompetent and lock me away in Sunset Hills forever. They could sell the company, pay off Courtney's gambling debts, and live like kings on the ashes of my life. I looked at Kendrick. He was biting his lip. He knew this was wrong. He knew he wasn't qualified to run a lemonade stand, let alone a multi-million-dollar corporation. But he was weak. And weakness is a vacuum that sucks in evil. Dad, please, he said, just sign it. For your health, we will take care of everything. We will bring Leo to visit you every Sunday. Leo the First repeated. The name was the trigger. They were dangling my grandson like a carrot. I can see Leo the First asked, letting a tear roll down my cheek. Even with the police order. Courtney smiled. It was the smile of a predator who has just trapped its prey. If you sign the papers, Orson, we can drop the order. We just want you to be safe. We want to be a family again. But you have to let us take the wheel. You are too sick to drive. I reached out my shaking hand. I touched the paper. I felt the texture of the trap. I need a pen, I whispered. Courtney practically scrambled to find a pen in her purse. She clicked it open and handed it to me. Her hand was shaking too, but from greed, not age. I held the pen over the signature line. I let it hover there. I watched them holding their breath. I can't do it today, I said, dropping the pen. My hand, it hurts too much. I can't hold it steady. Courtney's face fell. Just make an X. Orson, just make a mark. It is legal. No, I said, sinking back into the pillows. It has to be right. I want to do it right. Come back tomorrow. Bring the notary. I will sign it tomorrow. I promise. I just want to sleep now. Please. Kendrick stood up. He looked relieved. Okay, Dad. Tomorrow. We will come back first thing in the morning. Get some rest. Courtney looked furious, but she masked it quickly. She leaned down and patted my arm. It felt like being touched by a snake. Tomorrow, then, she said. Don't worry about anything. We have it all planned out. Sunset Hills has a lovely room available overlooking the garden. You will love it. They walked out of the room. I listened to their footsteps fading down the hallway. I heard Courtney whisper, "We got him. He is done." The door clicked shut. I waited 1 minute, then 2. I sat up. I stopped shaking. I poured myself a fresh glass of water and drank it in one steady gulp. I pulled the blanket off my legs. I walked to the window and looked down at the parking lot. I saw them walking to Courtney's car. They were high-fiving. They were celebrating the impending death of Orson Diggs. I pulled my phone from under the mattress. I had recorded the entire conversation. Every word about the nursing home, every lie about the company, every manipulative promise to trade access to my grandson for control of my assets. I dialed Lydia. "Did you get it?" she asked. "I got it," I said, my voice strong and clear. "They want to put me in Sunset Hills. They want power of attorney. They admitted the restraining order was a bargaining chip. That is coercion," Lydia said. "That is elder abuse, attempting to manipulate a medical patient into signing financial documents. The judge is going to vomit." "I am checking out, Lydia," I said. "Get the paperwork ready for the custody hearing, and call the board of directors at Diggs Electric. Tell them I am calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning." "What is the agenda?" Lydia asked. I smiled at my reflection in the hospital window. "The agenda is a hostile takeover," I said, "but not the kind they planned. I am taking over my son's life. I am going to strip him of every illusion he has left. He wants to run the company fine. I will give him a job, but he is going to start in the dirt just like I did." I hung up. I took off the hospital gown and put on my clothes. I buttoned my shirt with steady fingers. The frail old man was gone. The checkbook was closed. The general was back, and tomorrow the ambush would begin. The dinner invitation came via text message from Kendrick. It was simple. "Dad, please come over. We cooked your favorite. We want to make peace." I stared at the screen for a long time. I knew what this was. It was not a peace offering. It was the Last Supper. And I was the one they intended to crucify. I dressed slowly. I chose a cardigan instead of a suit jacket to sell the image of the frail, declining old man. I practiced the tremor in my left hand until it looked natural. I walked with a slight shuffle. When I arrived at the Maple Drive mansion, the sight that greeted me was pathetic. The front door, which I had removed days ago, was covered by a sheet of plywood propped up with cinder blocks. They were still there, squatting in the shell of luxury like rats refusing to leave a sinking ship. They had rigged up some battery-powered lanterns because the electricity was still cut. The house smelled of stale air and desperation. Kendrick moved the plywood aside to let me in. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, his skin pale. Guilt eats a man from the inside out, and my son was being devoured. Courtney, on the other hand, looked triumphant. She was wearing a silk dress that was wrinkled, likely pulled from a pile of dirty laundry, but she wore it like armor. "Welcome home, Orson," she said, her voice dripping with artificial sweetener. "We are so glad you felt well enough to come. We made pot roast, just the way Etta used to make it." I flinched at the mention of my wife. Courtney had never met Etta. She had no idea how Etta cooked, but I nodded slowly, playing my part. "Thank you," I rasped, letting my voice crack. I just want to see family." We moved to the dining room. They had set the table with the fine china, the only things I hadn't seized or destroyed. The candlelight flickered, casting long, dancing shadows on the walls. It felt less like a dinner and more like a seance. We sat down. The pot roast was dry. The vegetables were mush. But I ate it. I chewed slowly, letting my fork clatter against the plate as if I lacked the strength to hold it steady. Kendrick poured wine. Cheap wine. The good stuff was gone. "Dad," Kendrick started, his voice nervous. "We have been thinking a lot about what you said at the hospital, about being scared, about forgetting things." I stopped chewing. I looked at him with watery eyes. "I am scared, Kenny." I lied. I walked into the kitchen yesterday and I didn't know why I was there. I looked at the blueprints for the new stadium project and they looked like hieroglyphics. I built this company from nothing, but now I feel like it is slipping through my fingers like sand. Courtney reached across the table and covered my trembling hand with hers. Her skin was cold. "That is why we are here, Orson," she said. "We want to catch the sand for you. We want to make sure your legacy is protected. You shouldn't be worrying about payrolls and contracts. You should be resting. You should be sitting in the garden at Sunset Hills enjoying the sunset." "The garden," I repeated, staring blankly at the candle. "Yes," she continued, emboldened by my passivity. "Kendrick is ready to step up. He has watched you for years. He knows the business. He just needs the legal authority to act on your behalf. Just temporarily. Just until you get your strength back." I looked at Kendrick. He was staring at his wine glass, unable to meet my gaze. He knew he didn't know the business. He knew he couldn't wire a lamp, let alone manage a commercial grid. But his greed was louder than his conscience. I don't know," I stammered. "The lawyers said—" "Shh." Courtney hushed me, like one quiets a fussy child. Lawyers complicate things. They drain money. We are family. Family takes care of family. We don't need outsiders telling us how to love each other. She reached under the table and pulled out a leather folder. I recognized it. It was one of mine. She had stolen it from my study during one of their unauthorized visits before the locks were changed. She opened it. Inside was the document, the durable power of attorney, the death warrant for my freedom. We typed this up ourselves based on the standard forms, she said, sliding a gold pen toward me. It gives Kendrick full access. He can pay your bills, manage the company, and make sure you get the best medical care money can buy. I looked at the document. It was thorough. It gave them the power to sell my house, liquidate my stocks, and commit me to an institution. It was a complete surrender of my life. I reached for the pen. My hand shook violently. I let the pen roll across the table. I can't, I muttered. I can't hold it. Kendrick picked up the pen. He came around the table. He stood next to me, smelling of fear and cheap cologne. He placed the pen in my hand and wrapped his fingers around mine to steady it. I got you, Dad, he whispered. Just relax. Just sign right there on the line. I looked up at him. This was his chance. This was the moment he could have thrown the pen away and said, "No, I can't do this to my father." I gave him 5 seconds. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. He didn't stop. He pressed my hand down toward the paper. "Okay," I whispered. "Okay." I lowered the pen to the paper. I felt the eyes of Courtney burning into the back of my neck. She was holding her breath. She was already spending the money in her head. She was buying the olive trees. She was buying the silence of her creditors. I started to write. But I did not write Orson Diggs. For 40 years, every check I signed, every contract I executed, I signed with a very specific flourish. My signature was a loop on the O, a sharp, jagged line for the D, and a long tail on the S that cut back through the entire name. It was distinctive. It was registered with every bank and notary in the state. George Henderson at the bank had a digital copy of it on his screen at all times. Tonight, I did not loop the O. I made it round and small. I did not make the jagged D. I made it soft and curved. And I left off the tail entirely. To the untrained eye, to the greedy eye, it looked like a signature of a tired old man. But to a bank algorithm, to a forensic accountant, it was a forgery. It was a reject. I lifted the pen. The ink glistened in the candlelight. There I breathed out, letting the pen drop from my fingers. "Is it done?" Courtney snatched the paper before the ink was even dry. She scanned it, her eyes wide with victory. "It is perfect, Orson," she said, a genuine smile finally breaking through her mask. "It is perfect. You did the right thing." She closed the folder and clutched it to her chest like a holy book. Now she said, her tone instantly shifting from sweet to dismissive. "You look exhausted. We shouldn't keep you. Kendrick, walk your father to his truck. We have a lot of paperwork to file in the morning." I stood up. I wobbled slightly, leaning on the table. "Yes," I said. "I am very tired. I think I will go home and sleep for a long time." Kendrick walked me to the door. He moved the plywood aside. The night air was cool and clean compared to the stifling atmosphere of the house. "Drive safe, Dad," he said. I looked at him one last time. I looked at the son I had carried on my shoulders, the son I had forgiven 1,000 times. "You take care of that paper, Kendrick," I said softly. "It is worth a lot." "I will, Dad. Don't worry." I walked to my truck. I climbed in and started the engine. I watched Kendrick slide the plywood back into place, sealing himself back into his tomb of darkness. I drove down the driveway past the gate and turned onto the main road. As soon as I was out of sight, I straightened my back. I stopped the shaking in my hand. I reached for a bottle of water and took a long, deep drink to wash the taste of their betrayal out of my mouth. They thought they had the keys to the kingdom. They thought the signature was their golden ticket. They didn't know I had just handed them a hand grenade. I picked up my phone and called George Henderson's private line. It was late, but I knew he would be up. "George," I said, my voice strong and commanding. "Orson." George answered. "Is everything okay?" "Everything is right on schedule," I said. "Listen carefully. Tomorrow morning, my son and his wife are going to walk into your branch with a power of attorney document. They are going to try to access the corporate accounts." "I will stop them," George said immediately. No, I commanded. Do not stop them. Invite them into your office. Offer them coffee. Let them present the document. Let them feel the weight of the money in their hands. Okay, George said, sounding confused. And then I want you to run the signature verification, run it through the fraud system. When it comes back as a mismatch, I want you to press the silent alarm. The silent alarm, George asked. Orson, that brings the police. That is for bank robbers. Exactly, I said. They are trying to rob me, George. They just happen to be using a pen instead of a gun. Treat them like criminals. Because after tonight, that is exactly what they are. I hung up the phone. I drove toward the city lights. I felt a strange sense of peace. The Judas kiss had been delivered. The betrayal was complete. Now all that was left was the crucifixion. But they had forgotten one crucial detail about the story of Easter. The grave doesn't hold the righteous. And tomorrow I was going to rise. The sun rose over the industrial park like a judgment. It reflected off the steel and glass of the Diggs Electric headquarters, a building I had constructed beam by beam. Inside, the air was usually filled with the sound of ringing phones and unrolling blueprints. But this morning, the air was thick with a different kind of tension. My son Kendrick walked through the double glass doors at 9 o'clock sharp. He was wearing a navy blue suit that I had bought him for a gala 3 years ago. It was a little tight around the waist now, a testament to his life of leisure, but he buttoned it with the confidence of a man who believed he had just inherited a kingdom. He did not stop at the front desk to greet Brenda, the receptionist who had given him lollipops when he was 5 years old. He walked right past her, his nose in the air, his leather briefcase swinging by his side. Brenda watched him go, her hand hovering over the phone. She knew what was coming. I had told her to expect him. I had told her to let him feel the weight of the crown before I took the head off the king. Kendrick marched straight to the executive suite. He pushed open the door to my office, the corner office with the view of the city skyline. He didn't knock. He threw his briefcase onto my mahogany desk and spun the heavy leather chair around. He sat down. He put his feet up on the desk. He took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of lemon polish and old money. He pulled out his phone and dialed Courtney. I knew this because the security cameras in my office captured every pixel of his arrogance. "I am in, baby Kendrick," said his voice loud enough to carry into the hallway. "The chair fits perfectly. It smells like old man in here, but we will remodel. We will rip out this dark wood and put in something modern. Glass and chrome, like an Apple store." He laughed. It was a sound that made my skin crawl. "Yeah, I called the meeting," he continued. "I am going to trim the fat. Mike the foreman. He is gone. He is too expensive and he questions me too much. I am going to bring in that guy your brother knows, the one who does consulting. We need fresh blood, Courtney. We need people who understand the vision." He hung up. He stood up and adjusted his tie in the reflection of my diploma on the wall. He didn't look at the degree. He looked at himself. He saw a CEO. I saw a vandal in a suit. 5 minutes later, Kendrick walked into the main conference room. The entire senior staff was there. Mike the foreman with hands like catcher's mitts. Sarah, the head of accounting, who counted pennies like they were diamonds. David, the lead engineer. They all looked at Kendrick with a mixture of confusion and disdain. They knew I was supposedly sick. They knew the rumors. But seeing this boy, this soft-handed child, standing at the head of the table was an insult to their years of service. "Good morning, everyone," Kendrick announced, slapping his hands on the table. "As you know, my father Orson is currently incapacitated. His health has taken a severe turn for the worse. It is a tragedy, really. His mind is going. He can't remember his own name half the time." He paused for effect, trying to look sad. "No one bought it." Mike crossed his massive arms and glared. Because of this, Kendrick continued, his voice hardening. "I have been granted full power of attorney. I am taking over immediately as interim CEO. And frankly, looking around this room, I see a lot of inefficiency. I see a lot of old ways of doing things. Diggs Electric needs to pivot. We need to be leaner. We need to be younger." He pointed a finger at Mike. "Mike, your salary is eating up 12% of our overhead. And frankly, your attitude doesn't fit the new culture I'm building. You are relieved of duty. Pack your things." Mike stood up. The chair scraped loudly against the floor. "You are firing me, boy," Mike growled. "I was pouring concrete with your daddy while you were still wetting the bed." Kendrick sneered. "It is Mr. Diggs to you. And yes, you are fired. Get out." The room went deadly silent. Kendrick looked around high on the power. "Anyone else want to challenge me?" he asked. This is my company now. My name is on the door. Actually, a voice cut through the silence like a razor blade. Your name is on a birth certificate. That is the only piece of paper you own in this building. The door at the back of the room swung open. I stepped inside. I was not wearing a cardigan. I was not shaking. I was wearing my charcoal three-piece suit, the one I wore to close the deal on the stadium project. I stood 6'2". My back was straight. My eyes were clear. Behind me stood Lydia Stone holding a black briefcase and two of my largest security guards, massive men who looked like they chewed iron for breakfast. Kendrick froze. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. He looked like he had seen a ghost. In a way, he had. He had seen the ghost of the father he thought he had buried under lies. "Dad," he stammered. "But you were dying." I walked to the head of the table. Kendrick scrambled out of the chair, backing away until he hit the whiteboard. "I was resting, Kendrick," I said, my voice low and rumbling. "There is a difference, but..." "The papers," Kendrick shouted, pointing at the folder on the table. "I have the power of attorney. You signed it. I have the legal right." Lydia stepped forward. She didn't look at Kendrick. She looked at the document on the table as if it were a soiled napkin. "Mr. Diggs," she said, her voice ice cold. "The document you are referring to was flagged by the bank's fraud department at 8:05 this morning." "Fraud," Kendrick yelled. "He signed it." "I watched him sign it." "Yes," Lydia said. "You watched him sign a name, but you didn't watch him sign his signature." She opened her briefcase and pulled out a magnified image. It was projected onto the screen behind Kendrick. On the left was my official signature, the sharp, jagged one with the looped O. On the right was the shaky, rounded scrawl I had put on the paper last night. "The bank rejected it immediately," Lydia explained. "And since you attempted to use a document with a mismatched signature to access corporate funds, the bank froze the attempt and notified the account holder, which is Orson Diggs." Kendrick looked at the screen. He looked at me. The color drained from his face. You faked it," he whispered. "You faked being sick." I stepped closer to him. I could smell the sweat breaking out on his skin. "I didn't fake anything, Kendrick," I said. "I showed you exactly what you wanted to see. You wanted a weak old man. You wanted a victim. So I gave him to you. And what did you do? Did you care for him? Did you protect him? No. You tried to bury him. You tried to fire Mike. You tried to gut my company to pay for your wife's gambling debts." Kendrick's eyes widened. "You know I know everything I said. I know about the $200,000. I know about the fake job. I know about the payday loans." I turned to the staff. They were watching wide-eyed. "This man," I said, pointing at my son, "is not the CEO. He is not an employee. He is a trespasser." Kendrick panicked. He tried to puff up his chest. He tried to find one last scrap of authority. "You can't do this. I am your son. This is family business. You are humiliating me." "Humiliation is a choice, Kendrick," I said. "You chose it when you walked in here and disrespected the people who built your inheritance." I turned to the security guards. "Remove him," I commanded. The guards stepped forward. Kendrick backed up, knocking over a pitcher of water. "No, don't touch me. Dad, tell them to stop. Courtney is going to sue you. We will sue you for everything." I laughed. It was a dark, hard laugh. "Sue me with what money, Kendrick?" "Your cards are dead. Your trust is frozen. And as of this morning, Lydia has filed a countersuit for attempted corporate fraud and elder abuse. You are not going to court to get money. You are going to court to stay out of jail." The guards grabbed him, one by each arm. They didn't hurt him, but they didn't handle him gently. They gripped him with the firmness of men who knew they were taking out the trash. "Dad, please," Kendrick screamed as they dragged him toward the door. "I am sorry, I will fix it. Just give me another chance." I watched him go. I watched his expensive Italian shoes dragging on the carpet. I watched the door swing shut behind him, cutting off his screams. The room was silent again. Mike was still standing. Sarah was holding her breath. I looked at Mike. "Sit down, Mike," I said. "You have work to do, and take a raise, 10%, for dealing with the pest control." Mike smiled a slow, gritty smile. "Good to have you back, boss." I walked to the window. I looked down at the street. I saw the security guards escorting Kendrick out of the building. They didn't let him wait for a ride. They walked him to the edge of the property and left him on the sidewalk. He stood there alone, small, adjusting his suit jacket, looking at the building that was no longer his future. I felt a sadness deep in my bones, the sadness of a father who has had to amputate a limb to save the body. But then I looked at the reflection of the boardroom behind me. My team was getting back to work. The phones were starting to ring, the blueprints were being unrolled. The heartbeat of the checkbook had stopped for Kendrick, but the heartbeat of Diggs Electric was stronger than ever. I turned back to Lydia. "Get the car," I said. "We have one more stop." "Where to?" she asked. "The courthouse," I said. "I took his job. Now I am going to take his son." The war was not over. The battle of the boardroom was won, but the battle for Leo was just beginning. And I had never lost a fight when the prize was worth dying for. I buttoned my jacket. Orson Diggs was back in business. And business was good. You would think that after being evicted from a mansion, caught lying to the police, and watching her husband get thrown out of his own father's company, a woman like Courtney might finally learn the value of humility. You would think she would retreat, find a quiet corner, and try to rebuild her life with some dignity. But humility is a foreign language to a narcissist. When their world catches fire, they do not grab a hose. They grab a mirror to make sure they look good in the orange glow. Courtney did not go into hiding. Instead, she decided to double down on the delusion. She organized a high tea. She held it at the Gilded Cage, the most expensive patio cafe in the city. It was a place where a cucumber sandwich cost $20, and the water was imported from glaciers that no longer existed. She invited 15 of her closest friends, the same women who had shared her defamatory posts about me, the same women who were currently whispering about how tragic it was that the Diggs family had fallen apart. She framed the event as a fundraiser for baby Leo. She called it the Leo Defense Fund. She told everyone that I had frozen their assets illegally and that she needed help to pay for legal fees to protect her child from a monster. I sat in my truck across the street. I watched through the window. She was wearing a white dress and a wide-brimmed hat. She looked like a movie star. She was laughing, touching the arms of her friends, pouring tea from a silver pot. She looked untouchable. She looked like she had won. Mo, my private investigator, sat in the passenger seat next to me. He was eating a bag of peanuts and shaking his head. "She has nerve," Orson, Mo said. "I will give her that. She is driving a stolen car to a party she cannot pay for to raise money for a lawsuit she is going to lose. That takes a special kind of crazy." "It is not crazy, Mo," I said, gripping the steering wheel. "It is branding. She thinks if she smiles bright enough, the darkness will not catch her. She thinks the Mercedes parked out front proves she is still the queen." I looked at the G-Wagon parked directly in front of the cafe entrance. It was shining in the sun. It was a beautiful machine. I had paid $150,000 for it. It was leased under the company name for executive transport. Courtney had claimed it as her personal chariot the day she married Kendrick. She treated it better than she treated my son. "Is the repo team ready?" I asked. Mo checked his phone. "They are turning the corner now." "And Orson, are you sure about the flyers?" "That is nuclear." I looked at the stack of papers on the dashboard. They were copies. High-resolution color copies of Courtney's credit card statements, her gambling losses, and the rejection letters from 3 different banks citing excessive debt. "She wanted to tell a story about money," I said. "She told the world I cut her off because of her race. She told the world I was stingy. I am just providing the footnotes. I am just showing the math." Mo chuckled. It was a dry, dark sound. "Let the math begin." The first thing the ladies at the tea party noticed was the sound. A high tea is supposed to be a quiet affair filled with the clinking of china and the murmur of polite gossip. It is not supposed to be interrupted by the guttural roar of a heavy-duty diesel engine. The tow truck I had hired was not a small pickup. It was a flatbed hauler, the kind used to move construction equipment. It was painted bright yellow and it smelled of grease and labor. It pulled up right in front of the cafe, blocking the view of the manicured gardens. The driver, a man named Rick, who had worked for me for 10 years, hopped out. He was wearing his neon safety vest and dirty work boots. The conversation at Courtney's table stopped. I saw heads turn. I saw Courtney stand up, her face flashing with annoyance. She waved her hand, gesturing for the truck to move as if she could traffic control reality with her will alone. Rick did not move. He walked straight to the Mercedes. He knelt down and began hooking the chains to the front axle. Courtney froze. Then she bolted. She ran out of the cafe, her heels clicking frantically on the pavement. Her friends followed, a flock of confused birds in designer feathers. "Excuse me," Courtney screamed, grabbing Rick's shoulder. "What do you think you are doing? Get away from my car." Rick stood up. He wiped his hands on a rag. He did not look intimidated. He looked bored. "I have a repossession order for this vehicle, ma'am," Rick said, his voice loud enough for the outdoor diners to hear. "The leaseholder, Diggs Electric, has reported unauthorized use of company property. I am taking it back to the yard." Courtney's face went from pale to red in a second. "Unauthorized. My husband is the CEO. This is my car. You unhook it right now or I will have you arrested." Rick ignored her. He walked to the control panel on the side of the truck and pulled the lever. The hydraulic winch began to whine. The chains tightened. The front of the Mercedes lifted into the air. "No," Courtney shrieked, grabbing the door handle of the car as if she could hold it down. "Stop it. This is a mistake. My father-in-law is doing this. He is sick. He is confused." That was my cue. I opened the door of my truck. I did not run. I walked. I walked slowly across the street carrying the stack of papers. Mo followed me looking like my bodyguard. I stepped onto the sidewalk. The winch stopped whining. The car was halfway up the ramp, hanging at an awkward angle, exposing the dirt underneath the chassis. "I am not confused, Courtney," I said. Courtney spun around. When she saw me, her eyes widened in genuine terror. She looked at her friends, then back at me. She realized she was trapped. "Orson," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Don't do this here. Please. We can talk." "We are done talking," I said. "You wanted a platform. You wanted an audience. You invited half the town to come hear about how terrible I am. Well, I brought some reading material for your guests." I walked past her. I walked up to the group of women standing near the cafe entrance. These were the women who had snubbed me at the wedding. These were the women who had liked her posts. "Ladies," I said, my voice calm and polite, "I know you have donated generously to the Leo Defense Fund. I think you have a right to know exactly what that money is defending." I handed the first flyer to a woman named Beatrice, the head of the local garden club. "What is this?" Beatrice asked, looking down at the paper. I handed another to a woman named Sarah, and another to a woman named Jessica. "It is a financial statement," I explained. "You see, Courtney told you I cut her off. She didn't tell you that she spent $200,000 on designer clothes she returned for cash. She didn't tell you she lost $50,000 on online poker sites last month alone." Courtney screamed. It was a primal sound. She lunged for Beatrice, trying to snatch the paper. "Don't read that. It is fake. He forged it." Beatrice pulled the paper back. Her eyes scanned the columns. "Courtney," Beatrice said, her voice shocked. "This lists a payment to a loan shark. And this one. Did you spend $12,000 on a handbag yesterday?" I turned to the group. "Look at the date," I said. "Yesterday, at 2 p.m. While she was posting about being homeless, she was buying a Birkin bag." The whispers started immediately. They were not whispers of sympathy. They were whispers of judgment, the social currency. Courtney valued more than gold was crashing before her eyes. "This is private," Courtney yelled, tears streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. "You can't show them this. It is illegal public records, Courtney," I said, cold as ice. "You filed for bankruptcy protection under the company name 3 hours ago to try and stop the eviction. It is all in the public filing. I just printed it out for convenience." Rick started the winch again. The Mercedes groaned as it was pulled fully onto the flatbed. The sound was final. Courtney looked at the car. She looked at her friends who were now backing away from her, clutching the papers like they were holy writ. She looked at me. "You are the devil," she whispered. I smiled. "No, Courtney. I am the auditor, and your account is overdrawn." I turned to Rick. "Take it away, Rick." Rick gave a thumbs up. He climbed into the cab. The truck rumbled. The Mercedes, the symbol of her fake status, rolled away down the street, bouncing slightly on the flatbed. I looked at the group of women. "Enjoy your tea, ladies," I said. "I would offer to pay, but I think the hostess might be a little short today." I walked back to my truck. I did not look back. I did not need to. I could hear the sound of a reputation shattering. It sounded like silence followed by the quiet shuffling of expensive shoes walking away from a sinking ship. Courtney stood alone on the sidewalk, the sun beating down on her, exposing every flaw, every lie, every ounce of the emptiness she had tried so hard to hide. She had wanted to be the center of attention. I had granted her wish. Now she was the center of a tragedy, and there was no one left to applaud. The 30th day arrived with a silence that felt like a held breath. The legal notice I had served them gave them until midnight to vacate the property. I did not go over there at midnight. I am not a monster who throws people out in the dark. I gave them the courtesy of the sunrise. But when the sun came up over Maple Drive, the driveway was not empty. The blinds were drawn tight. The gates were not just closed, they were chained shut with a heavy-duty padlock that glistened in the morning light. I parked my truck on the street. I walked to the gate. I saw the sign they had taped to the wrought iron. It was handwritten in black marker. Occupants claim squatter rights. Do not disturb. Squatter rights. They had gone onto the internet. They had looked for a loophole. They found a law meant to protect poor tenants from unfair landlords, and they were using it to hold a $5 million mansion hostage. They thought this was a game of capture the flag. They thought if they stayed inside long enough, the house would magically become theirs. I pulled out my key to the pedestrian gate. It did not turn. They had changed the cylinders. Of course they had. They used the last of their cash not to buy food but to buy a locksmith. I pressed the intercom button. I held it down until the buzzing sound filled the air. "Go away, Orson." Kendrick's voice crackled through the speaker. He sounded tired but defiant. "We spoke to a lawyer online. You cannot kick us out without a court hearing, and the courts are backed up for months. We are staying." I looked at the camera lens. "Open the gate, Kendrick." "No," Kendrick said. "You are trespassing. Leave us alone. We have rights." Rights. The word tasted like ash in my mouth. They had the right to remain silent, but they never used that one. They claimed the right to my money, the right to my property, the right to my reputation. Now they were claiming the right to steal my house. I did not argue. I did not scream. I stepped back from the gate. I looked at the house. It was a beautiful structure, brick and stone. I had selected every material myself. I knew the bones of that house better than I knew the bones of my own hand. And I knew that a house is only a shelter if it is sealed. If you break the seal, it is just a pile of rocks standing in the wind. I picked up my phone. I did not call the sheriff. The sheriff would tell me it was a civil matter now. The sheriff would tell me to file paperwork. I was done with paper. I called Mike. "Mike," I said, "get the boys, bring the truck, and bring the impact drivers." "What are we building, boss?" Mike asked. "We are not building," I said. "We are conducting an emergency structural remediation." I waited. An hour later, 3 Diggs electric vans and a heavy-duty flatbed pulled up. 10 men jumped out. These were men with shoulders like boulders, men who had been with me since the beginning. They saw the chain on the gate. They looked at me. I nodded. Mike walked up with a pair of bolt cutters. The snap of the metal was loud and satisfying. The chain fell to the ground. The gate swung open. We drove the trucks up the long driveway. We parked right in front of the fountain. I could see the curtains moving. I could see eyes peeking out. They were terrified. They probably thought I was coming to drag them out by their hair. I walked to the front door. I pounded on it with my fist. "Last chance, Kendrick. Open the door and leave with dignity. Go to hell." Courtney screamed from behind the wood. "I am live streaming this, Orson. If you break this door down, you go to jail." I smiled. I turned to Mike. "Remove it," I said. Mike looked at me. "Remove the door." "Boss." "Yes," I said loudly so they could hear. "The lease agreement states that the landlord has the right to perform maintenance on the property at any time. I have reason to believe the hinges on all exterior doors are defective. They are a safety hazard. We need to take them to the shop for repair." Mike grinned. He understood. He signaled the crew. The sound of power drills filled the air. It is a violent sound, a screeching, tearing sound. Inside I heard screaming. "What are you doing? Stop it! You cannot do this!" The crew worked with surgical precision. They did not break the wood. They simply unscrewed the hinges from the frame. The heavy oak door, a door that weighed 300 pounds, began to wobble. Then 4 men grabbed it. 1, 2, 3, lift. The door came away from the house. Courtney and Kendrick were standing in the foyer. They were wearing winter coats inside the house. They looked small. They looked exposed. The sunlight flooded into the dark hallway, blinding them. You took the door." Kendrick stammered. He stared at the gaping hole where his security used to be. I stepped over the threshold. I did not touch them. I stood in the open space. "I am taking all of them," I said. I pointed to the back of the house. The patio doors, the side entrance, the garage door. "Take them all off." Courtney lunged at me. This is illegal. You are making the house uninhabitable. I looked at her. No, I am making it safe. Cannot have defective hinges falling on my grandson. Speaking of Leo, where is he? He is at my mother's house, Courtney yelled. Thank God he is not here to see his grandfather lose his mind. Good, I said. Keep him there, because it is about to get very drafty in here. I signaled the rest of the crew. The windows too, Mike. The seals look dry. We need to recaulk everything. Take the panes out. The next 2 hours were a symphony of deconstruction. The crew moved room to room. They popped the beading. They removed the double pane glass. They carried the windows out to the truck and stacked them carefully between moving blankets. The house began to change. It lost its smell of perfume and stagnation. The outside rushed in. The wind was picking up. It was late October. The temperature was dropping fast. A cold front was coming in from the north. The air that swirled through the living room was crisp and biting. Leaves began to blow across the polished marble floor. A bird flew in through the living room window, circled the chandelier, and flew out the back door. The barrier between civilization and nature was gone. Courtney and Kendrick retreated to the kitchen. They tried to close the door, but the kitchen door was already on the truck. They huddled near the stove, trying to turn it on for heat. Gas is off. Remember, I said, leaning against the door frame. Get out, Orson, Kendrick shouted. He was shivering. His teeth were actually chattering. I am leaving, I said. I have a warm house to go to, a house with doors, a house with windows, because I pay the bills. I looked around the foyer one last time. It looked like a ruin, a beautiful modern ruin. The expensive silk drapes were flapping wildly in the wind. The dust was swirling in little tornadoes. You have 30 days to vacate, I said, but nobody said you had to be comfortable while you waited. I walked out to the driveway. The trucks were loaded. My house was now a skeleton. It had a roof, but it had no heart. Orson, Mike asked as he climbed into the van, you think they will stay? I looked at the weather forecast on my phone. Low of 35 degrees tonight. Chance of rain. Let them stay, I said. Let them feel the cold. Maybe it will freeze the entitlement out of them. We drove away. I watched in the rearview mirror. I saw Kendrick standing in the empty hole of the front doorway. He looked like a ghost haunting his own life. He wrapped his arms around himself and stepped back into the shadows. But there were no shadows anymore. The light was everywhere. The wind was everywhere. That night the temperature plummeted. I sat in my study with a fire crackling in the fireplace. I drank a glass of whiskey. I listened to the wind howling outside. I knew what was happening at Maple Drive. I knew the wind was whistling through the bedrooms. I knew the damp night air was soaking into the sofas. I knew they were huddled under every blanket they could find, listening to the terrifying sound of a house that offers no protection. They wanted to be squatters. They wanted to occupy the space without paying the price. So I gave them the space. I just took away the luxury. At 2 a.m., my phone pinged. It was a text from the security system I had disabled, but which still had battery power for the sensors. Motion detected. Master bedroom. Temperature alert. Internal temperature 38 degrees. I put the phone down. I added another log to the fire. I felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the flames. It was the warmth of justice. They were finally learning that the world is a cold place when you burn the only bridge that leads to home. The wind that night did not just blow through the mansion on Maple Drive, it screamed. It tore through the empty window frames like a freight train carrying dead leaves and freezing rain into the living room that was once featured in architectural magazines. The temperature inside dropped to 30 degrees. The expensive marble floors, usually polished and warm, were now slick with moisture and cold enough to freeze bone. Kendrick and Courtney were huddled in the master bedroom. They had dragged the mattress into the corner furthest from the window hole, creating a nest out of designer duvets and cashmere throws. But cashmere does not stop a draft that has nowhere to go. They were shivering violently. Their breath came out in white clouds that hung in the stagnant air. For the first time in their marriage, there was no distraction. There was no television to watch. There was no internet to scroll through. There was no restaurant to run to. There was just the cold, the dark, and the terrifying reality of who they were when the money was gone. Courtney sat up, wrapping the duvet tighter around her shoulders. Her teeth were chattering, but her eyes were burning with a rage that seemed to be the only thing keeping her warm. She looked at Kendrick. He was curled in a fetal position, wearing his suit jacket over 3 sweaters. He looked pathetic. He looked weak. And Courtney hated weakness almost as much as she hated poverty. "Do something," she hissed. Her voice was raw from screaming earlier. Kendrick did not move. "Do what, Courtney? There is nothing to do. The car is gone. The doors are gone. We are trapped." "You are a man, aren't you?" she spat, kicking him in the shin under the covers. "Go down to the basement, find some wood, build a fire. Do something other than laying there like a dying dog." Kendrick sat up slowly. He looked at his wife. In the moonlight that spilled through the empty window, she did not look beautiful. Her hair was matted. Her mascara was smeared across her cheeks. Her face was twisted into a mask of pure ugliness. "The wood is wet," Courtney Kendrick said, his voice flat, "and the chimney flue is closed electronically. If I light a fire, we will die of smoke inhalation. Is that what you want? You want to kill us." "I want to be warm," she screamed, her voice cracking. "I want to get out of this hellhole. This is your fault. All of this is your fault. My fault." Kendrick laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound that frightened him. He had never laughed at her before. "How is this my fault?" "Because you are weak," she yelled, standing up and pacing the freezing room. "You let your father walk all over us. You let him humiliate me at the tea party. You let him steal the doors off our house. If you were a real man, you would have stopped him. You would have punched him. You would have taken control of the company years ago instead of waiting for a handout." Kendrick stood up too. The cold air hit him, but he didn't feel it. He felt a fire starting in his belly, a fire fueled by years of silence. "I didn't take control because I respected him," Kendrick shouted back. "Or maybe because I knew I wasn't ready. But you pushed me. You told me to lie to him. You told me to steal the money for your gambling." Courtney froze. "Don't you dare bring that up." "I will bring it up." Kendrick roared, his voice echoing off the empty walls. $200,000, Courtney. You spent $200,000 on clothes you returned and poker games you lost. And then you lied to me. You told me it was for Leo's future. You told me it was investments. It was an investment. She shrieked, stepping closer to him. Her eyes were wild. "I was building a brand. I was becoming someone. I was going to be famous. And then we wouldn't need your dad's dirty construction money anymore." "You are delusional," Kendrick said, shaking his head. "You are not famous. You are a laughingstock." Dad showed everyone the receipts. "Everyone knows you are a fraud. And now look at us. We are freezing in a house with no doors because you couldn't stop buying things we didn't need." Courtney slapped him. It was a hard, stinging slap across the face. It was the same way she had slapped his hand away when he tried to touch the thermostat in the past. It was a slap of ownership. "Don't you speak to me like that," she hissed. "I am the best thing that ever happened to you. You were a boring blue-collar nobody until I polished you up. I gave you style. I gave you class. You gave me debt," Kendrick yelled, grabbing her wrists. He had never touched her in anger before, but tonight the dam broke. "You gave me nothing but anxiety and debt. I lost my father because of you. I lost my job because of you. I lost my dignity because of you. And for what? So you could pretend to be a princess." He let go of her wrists and shoved her backward. She stumbled onto the mattress. "I am done," Courtney Kendrick said, his chest heaving. "I am done with the lies. I am done with the games. Tomorrow morning, I am walking out of here. I am going to apologize to my dad. I am going to beg him for a job shoveling gravel if I have to. And I am leaving you." The silence that followed was heavier than the wind. Courtney sat on the mattress, staring up at him. Her face went blank. The anger vanished, replaced by something much colder. A calculated malice. She realized she was losing control. She realized her ATM was walking away, and if she couldn't control him, she would destroy him. She started to laugh. It was a low, soft giggle that grew into a cackle. "You are leaving me?" she asked, wiping a tear from her eye. "You think you can just walk away?" "Watch me," Kendrick said, turning toward the doorless hallway. "You can't leave," Courtney said softly, "because if you leave, you will never see Leo again." Kendrick stopped. He turned back. "I will see him. The courts will give me custody. Dad has the best lawyers. We will prove you are unfit. You are an addict, Courtney. No judge will give you a baby." Courtney stood up slowly. She smoothed her wrinkled dress. She looked at him with pity. "You really are stupid, aren't you, Kendrick? You think a DNA test cares about my gambling debt. Kendrick frowned. What are you talking about? Courtney smiled. It was the cruelest smile Kendrick had ever seen. It was the smile of a woman who had pulled the pin on a grenade and was holding it tight. You think you are fighting for your son? She said, walking closer to him until she was whispering in his ear. But you don't have a son, Kendrick. The world stopped spinning. The wind seemed to die down. Kendrick felt the blood drain from his face. What did you say? He whispered. I said Leo isn't yours. Courtney said, her voice clear and steady. You remember that trip I took to Miami last year? The girls' trip. You stayed home to work on the nursery. Well, I met someone who wasn't a boring contractor's son. Someone with real money. Someone exciting. Kendrick shook his head. No, you are lying. You are just trying to hurt me. Am I? Courtney asked, tilting her head. Look at him, Kendrick. Really look at him. Does he have your nose? Does he have your ears? Or did you just see what you wanted to see because you were so desperate to make your daddy proud? Kendrick fell to his knees. The strength went out of his legs. He gasped for air, but the air was too cold. No, he sobbed. Leo is mine. He is my boy. Courtney stood over him, looking down like a goddess of vengeance. He is a prop, Kendrick. Just like this house. Just like your suit. Just like our marriage. It was all a prop to get access to Orson's money. And since the money is gone, the show is over. She leaned down and whispered the final blow. You are a checkbook, Kendrick. And now you are an empty one. So get out. Go run to your daddy. Tell him you raised another man's bastard for 6 months. See if he still wants you then. Kendrick let out a scream that tore his throat apart. It was a scream of pure agony, a sound of a soul breaking in half. He scrambled to his feet. He couldn't look at her. He couldn't look at the monster he had slept next to for 3 years. He ran. He ran out of the bedroom. He ran down the hallway where the wind howled like a choir of ghosts. He ran down the stairs, tripping and stumbling, bruising his knees, but feeling nothing. He ran through the foyer where the door used to be and burst out into the night. It was raining now, a freezing, sleeting rain that stung his skin. He didn't have a coat. He didn't have shoes. He was wearing his socks. But he didn't stop. He ran down the long driveway past the fountain that was dry, past the gate that was broken. He ran onto the main road. The asphalt tore at his feet. The rain soaked his clothes, instantly chilling him to the marrow. But the cold outside was nothing compared to the cold inside his heart. He didn't know where he was going at first. He just knew he had to get away from the poison. He had to get away from the lie. But as his feet pounded the pavement, a homing beacon activated deep in his mind. There was only one place left. There was only one person who had ever told him the truth. He ran for 3 miles. He ran until his lungs burned and his legs felt like lead. He ran until the lights of the city faded and the familiar street lights of his childhood neighborhood appeared. He turned onto the street where the house with the sturdy brick foundation stood. The house with the warm yellow light in the window. The house that had doors. He collapsed on the front lawn. He crawled the last few feet to the porch. He didn't have the strength to knock. He just curled up on the welcome mat, shivering, sobbing broken. Inside, Orson was sitting by the fire. He heard a sound. Not the wind, not the rain. A whimpering sound. The sound of a wounded animal seeking shelter. Orson put down his glass. He walked to the door. He opened it. And there, lying in the rain, was his son. Not the CEO, not the husband. Just a boy who had lost everything. Kendrick looked up, his eyes swollen, his face streaked with mud and tears. Dad, he choked out. She said he is not mine. Orson didn't ask questions. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't lecture. He saw the devastation in his son's eyes, and he knew the war had claimed its final casualty. He reached down. His large, calloused hands grabbed Kendrick by the shoulders. He pulled him up. He pulled him inside. He kicked the door shut against the storm. He held his son tight, letting Kendrick weep into his chest, letting the expensive suit ruin his cardigan with mud. I got you, Orson whispered into his son's ear. I got you. The checkbook is closed, son, but the door is open. And as Kendrick cried, letting go of the lie that had almost killed him, Orson looked out the window at the storm. His eyes were hard. Courtney had fired her last shot. She had tried to destroy Kendrick to save herself, but she had made a fatal error. She had given Kendrick nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous weapon of all. Tomorrow, Orson thought, holding his shivering son. Tomorrow we find the truth. And then we finish her. The morning after the storm, the sun came up over my house, but it brought no warmth. The air inside the kitchen was heavy, smelling of old coffee and fresh dread. Kendrick sat at the table. He was wearing an old t-shirt of mine that hung loosely on his frame. His eyes were swollen shut. His hands were shaking around a mug of black coffee. He looked like a man who had survived a plane crash only to wake up in a desert. I stood at the counter. I was cooking bacon and eggs. Not because we were celebrating, but because a soldier needs fuel before a battle. I plated the food and set it down in front of him. He did not pick up his fork. He just stared into the black liquid in his mug as if it held the secrets of the universe. "Eat," I commanded. My voice was not loud, but it filled the room. "I cannot," Kendrick whispered. His voice was a broken rasp. "Dad, if he is not mine, if I spent 6 months loving a stranger, I do not think I can survive that." I reached into the drawer next to the sink. I pulled out the box I had overnighted 2 days ago, the moment Mo had raised suspicions about Courtney's timeline even before she dropped the bomb on Kendrick. I slammed the box onto the table. It rattled the silverware. It was a DNA collection kit, the expedited kind used for legal disputes. "You do not have the luxury of dying, Kendrick," I said, leaning over the table. "You do not get to quit. You need to know." Kendrick recoiled from the box like it was a live snake. "I am scared," he admitted. "Good," I said. "Fear keeps you sharp, but ignorance kills you. Open it." He did not move. "Open it," I barked. He jumped. His trembling fingers clawed at the cardboard. He pulled out the plastic tube and the swab. He looked at me, pleading for a way out. He wanted me to tell him it didn't matter. He wanted me to tell him that family is more than blood. And usually I would say that. I would say that love makes a father. But we were not dealing with philosophy. We were dealing with a custody war. And in war, biology is ammunition. "Spit in the tube, Kendrick," I said. "We need your sample. I already have Leo's." He looked up confused. "How? You have not seen him." I smiled grimly. "I have my ways." When I dropped the formula off at the motel before the police arrived, I picked up the pacifier that had fallen on the ground near their car door. Courtney was too busy looking at her phone to notice. I bagged it. It is already at the lab. They are just waiting for the paternal match. Kendrick looked at me with a mixture of awe and terror. "You planned this." "I am always planning," I said. "Spit." He spat into the tube. It took him a long time to produce enough saliva because his mouth was so dry from fear. When it was done, I sealed the biohazard bag. I walked to the door where a courier was already waiting. I handed off the package. "Now we wait," I said, returning to the kitchen. "And while we wait, you eat." The next 48 hours were an agony I would not wish on my worst enemy. Kendrick did not leave the house. He paced the floorboards until I thought he would wear a groove into the wood. He did not turn on the television. He did not check his phone. He just walked and sat and stared at the wall. I went to work. I ran my company. I fired the incompetents Kendrick had hired. I reinstated the contracts. I kept busy because if I stopped, I would have to think about the possibility that Courtney was telling the truth. If Leo was not a Diggs, if my grandson was a lie, then the last remnant of hope for my legacy was gone. But more than that, it meant Kendrick had been hollowed out for nothing. On Thursday evening, the email arrived. I was sitting in my study. Kendrick was on the sofa asleep from sheer exhaustion. The notification pinged on my laptop. Priority lab results. Subject paternity test, 8944. I froze. My finger hovered over the mouse. I had signed multi-million-dollar contracts with less hesitation. I took a deep breath. I clicked. The document opened. It was a lot of medical jargon charts and numbers. I scrolled to the bottom, to the summary. Probability of paternity 99.9998%. I read it again. 99.9998%. Leo was his son. He was my grandson. The blood was undeniable. The science was absolute. I felt a rush of relief so powerful it almost knocked the wind out of me. But then a second later, the relief turned into a cold, hard rage. If Leo was his son, that meant Courtney knew. She knew. She lied. She did not lie to cover up an affair. She did not lie to protect a secret. She looked her husband in the eye, a man she had vowed to love, a man who was breaking apart in front of her, and she told him his child was a bastard. She planted a knife in his heart and twisted it not because it was true, but because she wanted to see him bleed. She wanted to hurt him so badly that he would never recover. She used the identity of an innocent baby as a torture device. I stood up. I walked into the living room. "Kendrick," I said. He woke up instantly. He sat up, his eyes wide, his chest heaving. Did it come?" he asked. I did not smile. This was not a happy moment. This was a moment of clarity. I handed him the laptop. "Read it," I said. Kendrick took the computer. His hand shook so hard the screen wobbled. He squinted at the numbers. He read the line. He stopped breathing. He read it again. Then he let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "He is mine," he whispered. "He is really mine. He is yours," I said. "The science does not lie." Kendrick dropped the laptop onto the cushion. He put his head in his hands. He started to cry. But these were not the tears of the other night. Those were tears of despair. These were tears of relief, followed quickly by the dawning realization of what had been done to him. "She lied," Kendrick whispered through his fingers. "She looked me in the face and said he wasn't mine." "Why? Why would she do that?" "Because she is evil, Kendrick," I said, my voice low. "Do not look for a complex reason. Do not look for trauma or excuse. She saw you were leaving her. She saw her bank account walking out the door, so she tried to kill you. She couldn't use a gun, so she used the one thing she knew would destroy you. She tried to make you abandon your own flesh and blood." Kendrick looked up. His face changed. For the first time in his life, the softness was gone. The boy who wanted everyone to like him, the boy who bought olive trees to please a narcissist, vanished. In his place sat a man who had looked into the abyss and survived. "She wanted me to leave him," Kendrick said, his voice steadying. "She wanted me to think he was nothing so I would stop fighting for him. She wanted to keep him as a bargaining chip for alimony." "Yes," I said. "She held a baby hostage. She is not a mother. She is a kidnapper." Kendrick stood up. He walked to the window. He looked out at the dark street. He didn't look like a victim anymore. He looked like his father. "I am going to destroy her," Kendrick said. I nodded. "Now you are speaking my language. I do not want her money because she has none," Kendrick continued. "I do not want her apology because it means nothing. I want my son. I want her name off his birth certificate if I could, but I will settle for her never seeing him again." I walked over and stood next to him. We looked like two towers standing against the night. "We have the DNA," I said. "We have the financial records of her gambling. We have the proof of her neglect. And now we have the proof of her malice. No judge in this country will give custody to a woman who tells a father his child is a bastard just to win an argument." "Call Lydia," Kendrick said. "It is 10 at night, son." "I do not care," Kendrick said, turning to me. His eyes were burning with a cold fire. "Call Lydia. I want a file for emergency custody. I want the police to pick up Leo tonight. She is dangerous. If she can lie about this, what else will she do to him when she realizes the money is truly gone?" I pulled out my phone. I dialed Lydia. "Orson," she answered, sounding sleepy. "Wake up, Lydia," I said. "We have the DNA. The boy is a Diggs, and Kendrick is ready to go to war." I put the phone on speaker. "Lydia," Kendrick said, his voice deep and commanding. "This is Kendrick. I want full sole custody. I want supervised visitation only if that. And I want a psychological evaluation ordered for Courtney immediately. She is a pathological liar and a danger to my son." I heard the smile in Lydia's voice. "Welcome to the fight, Mr. Diggs," she said. "I will have the papers ready by morning." Kendrick hung up the phone. He looked at me. "Let's go get him, Dad," he said. I put a hand on his shoulder. "We will," I said, "but first we sleep. Because tomorrow we do not just win a court case. Tomorrow we save a life." Kendrick nodded. He walked to the stairs. He did not slump. He did not shuffle. He walked with the heavy, purposeful stride of a father who has a job to do. I watched him go. I realized then that I hadn't lost my son. I had just been waiting for him to grow up. It took a storm to break the shell, but the man who emerged was stronger than the boy who had entered. Courtney had made a fatal mistake. She thought she was breaking a weak man. Instead, she forged a strong one, and God help her when the hammer came down. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and fear. It was a smell I knew well from years of contract disputes, but today the stakes were not money. The stakes were a life. I sat in the back row behind the wooden railing. I wore my black suit. I sat still as a mountain. Beside me sat Lydia Stone, who had prepared a case so watertight that even a tsunami could not breach it. In front of us sat Kendrick. He did not slouch. He did not look at his shoes. He sat upright with his hands clasped on the table. He wore a simple gray suit. It was not expensive. It was not flashy. It was the suit of a man who had come to speak the truth. Across the aisle sat Courtney. She was dressed in white again. She was playing the role of the grieving mother, the victim of a powerful family that was trying to steal her baby. She dabbed at her eyes with a tissue every time the judge looked her way. Her lawyer was a loud man with a cheap tie. He started by painting me as a tyrant. He called me a manipulator who used money to control my children. He called Kendrick a puppet who had no job and no home without his daddy. It was a good story. If I did not know the truth, I might have believed it. But stories crumble when they hit the concrete wall of evidence. Lydia stood up. She did not raise her voice. She walked to the center of the room carrying a thick binder. She placed it on the judge's bench. "Your Honor," Lydia said, "we are not here to discuss the grandfather's wealth. We are here to discuss the mother's character." She opened the binder. Exhibit A, bank records showing Mrs. Diggs gambling away $50,000 in a single month while claiming to be destitute. Courtney gasped. Her lawyer tried to object, but the judge waved him down. Exhibit B, Lydia continued. Text messages from Mrs. Diggs to her own mother admitting that she viewed the child as a financial anchor to the Diggs fortune. Courtney stopped crying. Her face went pale. She stared at the binder as if it contained a bomb. And finally, Exhibit C. Lydia said, the paternity test results, and the sworn affidavit from Mr. Kendrick Diggs detailing the night Mrs. Diggs told him the child was not his in a deliberate attempt to force him to abandon the boy. The courtroom went silent. The judge, a stern woman with glasses on the end of her nose, looked up from the papers. She looked at Courtney. It was a look of pure disgust. "Is this true?" the judge asked. "Did you tell the father the child was illegitimate to inflict emotional distress?" Courtney stood up. Her mask slipped. "I was angry," she screamed. "He was leaving me. I had to stop him. He is weak, Your Honor. He cannot raise a child. He is nothing without his father." "Sit down," the judge commanded. Her gavel banged against the wood like a gunshot. The ruling came an hour later. It was swift. It was brutal. It was justice. The court finds that the mother has demonstrated a pattern of financial instability, emotional manipulation, and malicious cruelty, the judge read. The lie regarding paternity demonstrates a willingness to use the child as a weapon, which is a form of psychological abuse. Courtney began to sob, but nobody looked at her. Full legal and physical custody is awarded to the father, Kendrick Diggs. The mother is granted supervised visitation for 1 hour a month, pending the completion of a psychological evaluation and a gambling addiction program. Courtney screamed. She lunged toward Kendrick, but the bailiff caught her. She was dragged out of the courtroom, kicking and cursing, screaming that I had rigged the system. I watched her go. I felt nothing. No anger, no pity. She was just a storm that had finally blown out to sea. Kendrick stood up. He turned to me. He did not smile. He walked to the railing and reached over. He took my hand. His grip was firm. His palm was dry. "Thank you, Dad," he whispered. "Do not thank me," I said. "Go get your son." That was 1 year ago. Today the sun is shining on the job site. It is a new housing development on the west side of town. The frame of the building is up, smelling of fresh pine and sawdust. I walk through the mud, my boots crunching on the gravel. I am retired now, officially. I stepped down as CEO 6 months ago. But I still like to walk the sites. I like to hear the music of construction, the hammers, the drills, the shouting of men building something real. I saw him on the second floor. He was wearing a tool belt that looked heavy on his hips. He was covered in drywall dust. His face was smeared with grease. He was pulling a heavy gauge wire through a conduit, sweating in the heat. Kendrick. He looked down. He grinned. His teeth were white against the dirt on his face. "Hey, Dad," he called out. "Just finishing the rough-in. Mike says my corners are getting better." I walked up the temporary stairs. Mike, the foreman, was standing there holding a blueprint. "The kid works hard. Orson, Mike said, clapping Kendrick on the back. He does not complain. He shows up early. He leaves late. He is a good electrician. I looked at my son. He was not the CEO. He was not wearing a suit. He was making $20 an hour as an apprentice. He was living in a small 2-bedroom apartment that he paid for with his own money. He drove a used truck, and he had never looked happier. I turned to the stroller sitting in the corner of the safe zone. Leo was sitting there playing with a plastic hard hat. He was 18 months old now. He had big brown eyes and a smile that could light up a city block. I picked him up. He felt solid in my arms. He smelled like baby powder and sunshine. I reached into my pocket. I pulled out a small velvet box. Kendrick wiped his hands on a rag. "What is that, Dad?" I opened the box. Inside lay the gold brooch. The diamond caught the sunlight reflecting 1,000 rainbows onto the unfinished walls. I took it back for a reason, I said, looking at Kendrick. "I told you that you were just a checkbook. I was wrong. I was einustro. You were a man who had forgotten his name. But you found it again. You found it in the mud. You found it in the truth." I pinned the brooch onto Leo's denim overalls. It looked heavy on him, but he patted it with his chubby hand and laughed. "This does not belong to a rich man," I said. "It belongs to a Diggs. And a Diggs is a man who builds. A Diggs is a man who protects." Kendrick touched the brooch. His eyes were wet. "I will tell him the story one day," Kendrick said. "I will tell him how his grandfather saved us." "No," I said, shaking my head. "Tell him how his father saved himself." I looked out at the city skyline. I saw the buildings I had wired. I saw the lights I had turned on. But looking at my son standing there, dirty and proud, and my grandson holding onto my finger, I realized that this was the only project that mattered. Legacy is not the money you leave behind. It is not the buildings with your name on them. It is not the trust funds or the stocks. Legacy is the moment when everything falls apart and you choose to stand up. Legacy is looking at the wreckage of your life and picking up a hammer instead of a bottle. Legacy is the courage to be a father when it would be easier to be a victim. I kissed Leo on the forehead. "Let us go get lunch," I said. "I am buying." "But you are driving, Kendrick. My truck is parked in the back." Kendrick smiled. He took the keys from my hand. "Yes, sir," he said. We walked down the stairs together, 3 generations of men. The checkbook was closed. The account was settled. But the heart was full. And for the first time in a long time, the foundation was solid. This journey taught me that a man's worth is never defined by the balance in his bank account, but by the backbone he shows when the money runs out. I spent years thinking I was protecting my family by shielding them from the world, but I realized I was only crippling them. True love isn't about giving handouts. It is about teaching survival. I learned that family isn't just blood. It is loyalty, respect, and the courage to stand together in the storm. The checkbook is finally closed, but my heart is open, and for the first time it is full. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity, hit that like button. And tell me in the comments, would you have forgiven Kendrick, or did he deserve to stay in the cold? Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of justice. See you in the next one.